Chapter 920. The three family heads of Huangnan County stayed in the Lingzhou General's manor. They were not far from each other. Other than their trusted retainers, the three of them did not bring anyone else into this brand-new official residence with a horizontal board. His Royal Highness allowed them to rest for a night, which made Wang Shihua's heart tighten. This was clearly to give the three families enough time to communicate. Wang Gongxiao, Ling Su of Gozhouzian Zanolf, and Zijin Wanglting all rushed from their families to Lingzhou City at dawn. Apart from a careless lunch midway, they roughly communicated. Although they agreed to take care of each other, they were still wary of each other in their hearts. It was very difficult for them to advance and retreat together. When it came to the ups and downs of a large family, no matter how good their relationship was in the past, they had to carefully weigh the pros and cons. Wang Shihua, who was praised by Yao Baifeng as having the talent of 3 provincial governors, ate a dinner that could not be considered sumptuous. He was not in a hurry to agree to Wang Zhenl's appointment. Instead, he went out for a walk alone. Not long after he went out, he saw the junior Wang Lifting, who was also leisurely strolling. Wang Shihua was a little touched. To be able to keep his composure, the younger generation would surpass him in time. The two of them nodded and smiled as they brushed past each other. Wang Shihua walked along a corridor beside the water with his hands behind his back. The water flowed towards Jinhou Lake. Within Lingzhou City, there were not many residences that had the ability to draw water from the lake into their own courtyards. The administrator's manor next door was naturally one of them. Wang Shihua had an idea and turned into a small path close to the wall. Through the hole in the wall, he could see the inside of the Li Manor. Wang Shihua suddenly stopped. Coincidentally, on the other side of the wall, there was an official that he could not be more familiar with who was also approaching. After looking at each other, Wang Shihua, who had his hand behind his back, smiled. "Lord Li, why are you so free and elegant? I heard that Lord Li has found a son-in-law who is outstanding in terms of knowledge, character, and background. Congratulations, congratulations." He only addressed Li Gongda as Lord Li, but did not refer to himself as a lowly official or a lowly official. It was enough to show the arrogance of Huangnan County's merit officer, Wang Shihua. Li Gongda patted his sleeves and replied with a smile, "This official doesn't need to rely on some son-in-law for retirement. In any case, I have a son who can be considered to be quite promising. He's able to earn military merits on the border without being involved. Wang Gongxiao, you should take it easy." Wang Shihua nodded and said, "There are many great men on the border. Young Master Li is both in the battlefield and in love, so naturally people can't help but be envious. That son of mine has no ability and only knows how to hook up with girls from the brothels. He doesn't have such good fortune." Everyone in Bailiang knew that the administrator's son, Li Hanlin, used to be popular with both men and women. Almost every time he went out, he would be intimately accompanied by a handsome young man. Although the prodigal son had turned over a new leaf and no one doubted the authenticity of the crossbowman's military merits, the evil young master Li had committed too many heinous crimes. Tonight, he was mocked by Wang Shihua. Li Gongda did not refute and bent down. Wang Shihua was wondering why the administrator would admit defeat this time. He did not expect that after Li Gongda stood up, he would directly throw a handful of soil at Wang Shihua's face. It didn't hurt, but Wang Gongxiao, who had always been regarded as the cultured sect master of Lingzhou, had never been humiliated like this before. For a moment, he did not know how to react and was stunned on the spot. Li Gongda laughed and said, "F*** King Wang Shihua, you're the best at putting on an act. I wanted to beat you for a long time. There are no outsiders today. Only you and I are enemies. His Royal Highness, why are you here?" Hearing this, Wang Shihua unconsciously turned his head. In the inn, there was no one around. Where did His Royal Highness come from? When he turned his head again, Li Gongda threw another handful of soil at his face. Wang Shihua was unable to restrain his anger. He pointed a finger and scolded angrily. "Li Gongda, the 3 immortals of virtue and speech. As an important official on the battlefield, ask yourself honestly, is there any one of them? You've really tarnished the word merit and virtue. You're a cautious and fierce person. Do you really think you can die of old age? Ligonda carelessly rubbed his nose and then pointed a finger at the top of his head. He said disdainfully, "Everyone respectfully calls you Third Governor Wang." 3 governors. Isn't that the size of the official hat on my head? Don't talk big in front of me. Just tell me who's the highest official today, and who's the one who made you not take a single step forward all these years and obediently become a county's merit officer. Wang Shihua sneered and said, "Talking to you about passing on the torch, talking to you about the seeds of learning, is simply playing the lute to a cow." Ligonda chuckled and said in a low voice, "We're like chickens talking to ducks. In the end, we're still the same kind of people. Let's not laugh at each other. Wait until you become the second Yao by phone one day. Then you'll have the qualifications to talk to me about learning and merit." Wang Shihua flew into a rage and said, "Ligonda, who's the same kind of person as you?" Ligonda raised his hand. Wang Shihua, who had suffered twice, immediately dodged. Only then did he realize that there was no soil in the administrator's hand. Ligonda said that playing with Wang Shihua was as easy as playing with a monkey and left. Logically speaking, Ligonda, who had returned with a great victory, should be proud of himself. However, Ligonda, who was flushed with success in Bailiang, did not have the expected jubilation. Instead, his face was as gloomy as water. Wang Shihua's expression was uncertain at first. However, when Ligonda's figure disappeared into the distance, the corner of Wang Gongxiao's mouth quietly curled up. There was no longer any trace of anger. He said softly, Li Gongxiao, let's see how long you can run rampant." Su Fengnian received the second secret letter of the day. It came from an old turtle in Lingzhou. Even Su Fengnian did not expect it to be a level 4 Jianghu hero who had entered the Lingzhou general's mansion. It turned out that before everyone gathered at the door, the Lingzhou peregrine falcon had obtained the background of most of the people. Some were rough, some were detailed. The only thing missing was the drunkard who had appeared out of nowhere. It was probably because the foreign spy also felt that swaggering into the mansion was too suicidal. No one in the secret letter was suspected of being a spy. Most of them were Jianghu people who had criminal records in the government. This was not strange. In Jianghu, it was impossible to become famous without killing or being killed. Su Fengnian was carefully reading the secret letter in the study. The turtle nicknamed Yama's knife was kneeling on the cold floor. He did not move at all. Su Fengnian put down the secret letter and closed his eyes. After a long silence, he opened his eyes and said to the person, "You don't have to worry about the drunkard. However, have Chu Lushan immediately investigate the level 4 Lu Bozong and the level 3 Sun Shan. The backgrounds of these 2 people are too clean and too detailed. From birth to practicing martial arts to becoming famous, it seems that there are traces that can be traced. However, the more it is like this, the more uneasy it is. Of the 2 people, Sun Chun looks older. However, he is only 29 years old. Lu Bozong is 32 years old. They're the 2 youngest. Although I'm not a spy, I know that as long as you are willing to put in the effort, it is easy to get an identity before the age of 15. Then, you can train them carefully for more than 10 years. It is almost impossible to leave behind any traces. I even suspect that there is a problem with their family. I will have to trouble you peregrine falcons to put in more effort." The man was terrified. His back was drenched in sweat. He said respectfully, "Protecting your highness is the most important duty of the peregrine falcons. It is not troublesome at all." The man would undoubtedly respect the special identity of this young Lingzhou general, but he was even more afraid that he could directly call out the name of the head behind the peregrine falcons. Chu Lushan's fearsome abilities were all rumors. If one was not a peregrine falcon, they would not understand the terrifying abilities of the head of the Chu Lushan family. Su Fengnian walked around the desk to the man. He bent down to help him up. He laughed softly. "Bailiang has many civil and military officials. Compared to you, it is also 100 less. Without you, Bailiang will be even more unstable. Help me pass a message to Chu Lushan. This year, tell him to reward all the peregrine falcons. He does not need to pay for this. Take it out from Mount Qingliang. If anyone wants secret manuals or similar things, they can boldly ask. The Wang Fu will try to satisfy them. In my opinion, there is nothing in the world that is more valuable than life. Since you have pawned your lives to the Su family, then the Su family has no reason to treat you badly. Chapter 9:21. After the man stood up, his eyes turned red. He hesitated for a moment, then scratched his head, feeling a little shy. He gathered his courage and said, I'm from Jinzhou, only 300 li away from the generals and your highness's hometown. However, I left Liaodong 6 or 7 years later than the general. I once mingled in another army, but I committed a crime and had no choice but to follow the general. All these years, I've been working for General Chu, and I haven't made any contributions. It's all hard work that anyone can do. A few years ago, I married a wife and gave birth to a few little girls. At the beginning of autumn, I finally had a boy with a handle. My family doesn't lack money, so I'd like to ask your highness to name my boy when you're free. If your highness is too busy, just pretend that I didn't say anything. Su Fengyin said softly, there are many things to pay attention to when choosing a name. If it's not chosen well, it will affect one's future luck. I believe in this very much, so I don't dare to name your son. The man didn't have much hope, so he wasn't disappointed. Su Fengyin suddenly smiled and said, but Su Xiao doesn't believe in this. Why go to Liangzhou? I'll ask Su Xiao to name your son. If it's not chosen well, or if it's unpleasant, you can use it as a nickname. The man was about to kneel again, but Su Fengyin grabbed his arm and said helplessly, all right, even if you kneel a few more times, I can't ask for a few more names for your son. Besides, your son doesn't need them. Names aren't money, so the more the better. The man smiled shyly. He no longer had his original shrewdness and caution, but rather a sincere and honest look. After you leave, send a message to Su Beiji in Longqing County and ask him to come to the general's mansion. After saying this, Su Fengyin walked to the window. The man, who was full of joy, didn't disturb his Royal Highness's thoughts and silently left the study. Su Fengyin gazed at the pot of impatience balsamine that Huyan Guanyin had sacrificed to bring over. The strength of Liang lay in the fact that after the unification of the Central Plains, the Grand Preceptor Sun Shiji, as the head of the civil officials, led a large group of old remnants of West Chu to pledge their allegiance to Liang. The dust had completely settled on the dust of the struggle for orthodoxy in the world. As long as the imperial court was willing to use talents, there was practically an inexhaustible supply. These talents all had their own specialties. Some were focused on writing moral articles and establishing their views. Some were pragmatic and buried in their work to render meritorious service. There were also a large number of people doing dirty and tiring work. If Liang was said to be a fertile land with tens of thousands of mu and qualified to bully customers in the taverns, then Beiliang was a small piece of land. His master, Li Yishan, for so many years, could be said to be a clever housewife who couldn't cook without rice. Su Fengyin used to joke in private. Whether it was with Su Xiao or with his two sisters, he said that even if he could become the emperor, he would rather die than sit in the throne room. This was because he had long known how difficult it was to be in charge of a region. However, when he really began to personally set up the plan, he felt that even if he was the crown prince of Beiliang, if he wanted to do anything, he was still trapped in a square cage. The slightest movement would cause him to run into a wall. This cage was something painstakingly built by the people of each dynasty. Su Fengyin returned to the writing desk and picked up the brush to write down the loosely structured 3 words, only tell corpses. Then, he added a side note next to the word, only tell corpses, completing the word weave. Putting down the brush, Su Fengyin put his hands in his sleeves and walked out of the study. He walked aimlessly through the corridors and buildings. At a small pavilion by the water, he bumped into Wang Lifting, who was jumping around to warm himself. This fellow, along with Li Hanlin, Wang Yinshu, and a young master who committed crimes in Amei County, were known as the 4 tyrants of Lingzhou. Not to mention Wang Shihua, who could not be underestimated, but compared to the lifeless Wang Zhenlu, the head of the Su of Gojoseon family, Su Fengyin was undoubtedly more interested in this new master of the Purple Gold Wang family, Wang Lifting. Because of the hereditary succession, Bailiang was now in an unavoidable era of turmoil. A new emperor would bring in new officials. Those who should have fallen had already fallen, and those who should have risen had yet to rise. Many families were following the general trend and moving around, but the timing was different. Zhong Hongwu, who was born into a noble family, let his only son, Zhong Qingxin, take the path of a civil official in order to seek change. Wang Shihua, who was already a famous scholar, let Wang Yunshu take the path of a military general in order to seek change. However, most of these people had good fathers, so they could get twice the result with half the effort. Su Fengyin only knew that the Purple Gold Wang family had not produced any great talents for several generations. He originally thought that Wang Lifting's generation would also fall into decline. He did not expect that this time he would have the courage to come to the general's mansion. If he returned empty-handed, the first target to be dealt with by the administrator would definitely not be the two families of Wang Shihua and Wang Zhenlu, but the Purple Gold Wang family, whose foundation was not stable. It could be imagined that the young Wang Lifting was shouldering a lot of pressure. Seeing His Royal Highness approaching, Wang Lifting just turned his head and smiled, continuing to jump and jump. Su Fengyin stood beside Wang Lifting. The latter opened his mouth and joked, "Knowing that your highness is a straightforward person, Lifting will speak bluntly. This time, I follow behind my two elders here to ask for a reward from your highness. I'm really cutting off all means of retreat. If I don't get an official position, when I return to Huangnam County, I will definitely be criticized by those old men behind my back. Your highness, please do me a favor and take pity on Wang Lifting." Su Fengyin looked at the narrow ripples that were only slightly rippled within the rules and calmly said, "First, tell me what kind of official position you want. If it's too big, I can't afford it. If it's too small, I can't take it out. If I try to fool the Purple Gold Wang family, I will also be drowned in the spit of those old men behind my back." Wang Lifting laughed heartily and said, "It's not big. Bailiang's Weaving Bureau only has this kind of official position. The two Weaving Bureau in Gangnam-do are fourth-rank positions. Our Bailiang's Golden Thread Weaving Bureau is only fifth rank. Anyway, the old weaver Li Shifeng has worked for 12 years. He should have retired long ago." Su Fengyin said calmly, "Fifth rank isn't small." Wang Lifting was indeed thick-skinned. He stopped jumping and exhaled a mouthful of smoke. He turned his head and looked at His Royal Highness with a bright smile. Lifting knew that it would be difficult to get an official position, so I have the intention to buy one from your highness. The Purple Gold Wang family is willing to take out 180,000 taels of silver, all in cash. If it's not enough, the family still has some rare antiques and calligraphy rubbing, which can be converted into silver. As long as your highness is generous, we can probably gather another 100,000 taels of silver. There's no other way. We can't be compared to the other three princes of Huangnam County. Our Purple Gold Wang family is poor." Su Fengyin sat on a long bench and gestured at Wang Lifting. The two of them sat facing each other. Su Fengyin smiled and said, "I can sell you a golden thread weaving bureau for 180,000 taels of silver. However, there's an additional condition." Wang Lifting smiled and said, "Your Highness, my sister is indeed famous for being virtuous. However, her beauty is only average. Furthermore, she has a matchmaker. Your Highness, please don't have this idea." Su Fengyin was stunned. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He smiled and said, "Don't try to be glib with me. Let's be serious. I know that you have a good friend who comes from a poor family. He is a teacher in the Purple Gold Wang family. Yao Baifeng said that as long as this person is willing to take the imperial examinations and obtain scholarly honors, he will definitely become the top scorer of the Lingzhou imperial examinations, as well as the Huiyuan imperial examinations of the 8 prefectures. He might even become the Zhuangyuan imperial examinations of the 3 prefectures. This year, Liu Yuan of Huangnam County obtained the top 3 of the palace examinations and was bestowed with the title of Jinshi. It seems that he benefited from your friend's weaving techniques. Otherwise, he would only be able to pass the county examinations. Not to mention the palace examinations. Even the metropolitan examinations would be an extravagant hope. If you can persuade this person to leave the mountain, I will let you become a golden thread weaving bureau. If you can't persuade him, then you will have to obediently return to the purple gold Wang family. Wang Lifting held his stomach and laughed loudly. Su Fengnian was indifferent. Wang Lifting stopped laughing and said with a cunning expression, "Your Highness, please don't worry. This fellow has already been forcefully kidnapped by me and brought to the city. Should I call him over for your Highness now?" Su Fengnian shook his head and said, "There's no need to meet him. Tell him to come to Lingzhou's capital after the new year. I have an official's hat to give to him for free." Wang Lifting sighed ruefully and said, "Comparisons are odious. I still have to spend my entire fortune to buy an official's position. This fellow has it all." Su Fengnian suddenly said, "You are neither the son of the first wife nor the eldest son. To be able to become the head of the purple gold Wang family, it must not have been easy." Wang Lifting retracted his frivolous expression. However, he did not purposely sit upright and still. Instead, he said softly, "Compared to your Highness, it is much easier." Su Fengnian laughed and said, "You haven't even become an official yet, and you are already bootlicking?" Wang Lifting laughed again. "Let's get familiar with each other first. Since I want to live under someone else's roof, how can I not look at his face? In the future, your Highness should give Wang Lifting more opportunities to flatter you." Su Fengnian joked, "Then you should first become Chu Lushan's disciple and learn from him." Wang Lifting wanted to say something, but stopped. Su Fengnian knew that he was a smart person and said directly, "I know what you are thinking. Indeed, whether it is me or others, Chu Lushan's bootlicking has always been disgusting. However, there is one thing that many people don't see. Chu Lushan only treats one person this way. This is called being faithful to one person until death. Therefore, he and Administrator Li both." At this point, Su Fengnian paused for a moment and did not continue speaking. He stood up and left directly. Wang Lifting, who had been secretly tense, did not think too deeply about the strange words at the end. After all, he had obtained everything he wanted on this trip and had even exceeded his expectations. At the same time, he felt as if a heavy burden had been lifted off his shoulders, and he could not suppress his excitement. However, when he realized the meaning behind it, he felt a chill all over his body. Could it be that the owner of the neighboring mansion would also change his name as Bailiang changed? Chapter 922. When Su Beiji entered the Lingzhou general's manor, it was only 3 days away from New Year's Eve. Almost as soon as he entered the official residence, he immediately followed His Royal Highness to Liangzhou. If this special honor fell into the eyes of others, it would really be Bailiang's favor. On the return journey, there were 2 carriages. Huyan Guanin occupied one. Su Fengnian and Su Beiji squeezed into the other carriage. The 2 coachmen were respectively Su Yambing and Hong Shuwen. There were no other personal guards or attendants. Su Beiji listened to Su Fengnian talk about the matters of Huangnam County and did not comment. Persimmon and Zhu Zi, when they interacted with each other, they seemed to be quite similar to the king of Yin and Nalan Yusi. They could be said to be the perfect example of a ruler and his subjects being compatible. The first time Su Beiji opened his mouth was to ask why he did not let Song Gu, who blocked the way, finish speaking. This was because Su Beiji was clear about the matter of Shiitake-in. Originally, Eagle Guard's negligence of Renshanyu's serious injury was not a big deal. However, when His Royal Highness saw the result with his own eyes, with Chu Lushan's gloomy nature, Song Gu's official career was definitely over. Whether or not he could keep his life was another matter. If Su Fengnian scolded and kicked him a few times and got angry, Chu Lushan could use this as an excuse to get off the donkey. He only needed to heavily reprimand Song Gu. In the end, he could still forgive Song Gu. At most, he would temporarily teach him a lesson and give face to His Royal Highness and the Eagle Guard. In the future, he would not hinder Song Gu's appointment. However, Su Fengnian did not say anything. How could Chu Lushan dare to take the initiative to minimize the matter? Su Fengnian's answer at that time was that he would never interfere in the affairs of Bailiang's spies. He could even tolerate the peregrine falcon and the eagle guard, who had turned from a colleague to a rival after the Bailiang spy agency split up. However, he would never allow the two to be like fire and water and take advantage of each other to hit each other when they were down. Bailiang could not afford this kind of internal friction. On this matter and all the disputes in the future, Su Fengnian would not be partial to his second sister, Su Weisheng. He would not deliberately support the Eagle Guard to suppress the Peregrine Falcon. Similarly, he would not take the initiative to side with Chu Lushan. He would not beat the paste 50 times and settle the matter with 50 strokes of the paddle. When Su Beiji heard this answer, he smiled generously. Obviously, he was quite satisfied. It was difficult for an upright official to settle a family dispute. The root of the problem was that the person who held the bowl of water was not impartial. If he was not impartial this time, it would be difficult in the future. However, being impartial also had its difficulties and disadvantages. If he was not careful, he would be in a difficult position. This depended on whether Su Fengnian could persist to the end. Su Fengnian told him everything he knew. In addition to the 3 princes of Huangnam County joining hands to come to the general's residence to express their loyalty, he also mentioned that each of them wanted to be an official. The way they wanted to be an official was also very different. He also mentioned to Su Beiji that Wang Lifting had offered to spend money to buy the golden thread weaving. Hearing this, Su Beiji frowned and said, "Can this person take on a big responsibility?" Su Fengnian shook his head and said, "I've only met him once. I only feel that Wang Lifting's conversational style is not bad and very much to my liking. As for whether or not he could take on a golden thread weaving, I still need to get a few more detailed reports on the purple gold Wang family. Then, I'll bring Wang Lifting out for a walk to know whether he is a mule or a horse. However, the golden thread weaving is in Lingzhou. When the time comes, the one who will have a headache will be you, the provincial governor of Lingzhou." Su Beiji asked, "Then what about the old weaving, Li Shifeng?" Su Fengnian said shamelessly, "I haven't thought about it yet. Why don't you decide when the time comes?" Su Beiji glared at him. He was probably too lazy to pay attention to his royal highness and sank into deep thought alone. Every Dao in the world had a weaving bureau. Even the Bailiang Dao was no exception. On the surface, it was for the imperial family and officials to weave and distribute the silk produced in various places. However, in secret, it was very powerful. In the previous dynasty, the Weaving Bureau had a habit of sending secret reports to the capital every month. It could reach the emperor's desk directly. Passing this kind of information on the courier route was even more careful than normal military information. The king of Jiaodong, Zhao Sui, and the king of Huainan, Lu Ying, have been severely punished by the emperor several times because of the secret reports from the Weaving Bureau. Currently, the Liang Imperial Court had set up the Dao level. Although the Weaving Bureau of the various regions had not raised their ranks, all the smart people in the court and in the field were well aware that other than the Jingshi sent out from the capital to impede the vassal kings, these dozen or so low-ranking Weaving Bureau officials were the most sinister and disgusting. However, Li Shifeng, the Golden Thread Weaving Bureau, which belonged to the Bailiang Dao, was nearly 70 years old and had been mediocre for many years. He had never had any interactions with the king of Bailiang, Su Xiao. He neither took the initiative to flatter, nor was he too estranged. Once, there was a twice-yearly half-year discount that was inadvertently intercepted by a group of audacious horse bandits on a post-house road. Only then did people know that this chief weaving official was muddle-headed and bored enough to introduce his Royal Highness antique collection to the Emperor of Bailiang. He listed nearly 40 items and more than 600 pieces in detail. No one could understand why such a muddle-headed old man was allowed to stay in Bailiang and waste the salary of the imperial court. It was said that after the secret report was leaked, Su Xiao, who was still a pillar of the country at that time, laughed heartily when he heard about it. He had people send the same amount of money as the Zhao family salary to the Golden Thread Weaving Bureau. Over the years, Li Shifeng was not afraid of the emperor's suspicions and received the money every time. However, no matter how much outsiders ridiculed and looked down on this old man, Li Shifeng, the insiders of Bailiang, and even Li Yishan had carefully analyzed this person's official career and talent. Su Xiao did not send the money to make fun of Li Shifeng's idleness. Instead, he was telling the Golden Thread Weaving Bureau, who was good at analyzing the situation in Bailiang, that he, Su Xiao, had begun to have his eyes on him. Chapter 923. Su Fengyan didn't hide anything from Su Beiji. When the Yin family betrayed Bailiang and went to the capital to enjoy wealth, it was the Weaving Bureau that pulled the strings between the imperial court and the imperial court. The escape route, the disguise, and the various locations along the way were all carefully planned. However, Li Yishan had been watching from the sidelines. In this game of intrigue between Bailiang and the imperial court, Bailiang was one step ahead. In addition, Chu Lushan spared no effort in investigating. In the end, they were intercepted by Bailiang's spies. However, Su Fengyan was soft-hearted and personally pleaded for mercy for the Yin family. Only then did Su Xiao let them go. Otherwise, even if Wang Xinji came to Bailiang personally to save them, she would only be able to save 1 or 2 people. Although Li Shifeng lost, it was amazing that he could still do what he did when he was surrounded by wolves in Bailiang. Su Beiji broke the silence and said, "If Li Shifeng wants to spend his old age peacefully, he has to make a deal with Bailiang before he returns to the capital. However, this deal will only benefit him." Su Fengyan was silent, but his expression was somewhat gloomy. Su Beiji raised his eyebrows and said bluntly, "I remember that you used to have 3 very good friends. Among them, Yin Shiji has already followed his family to the capital to become a relative of the imperial court. He has a bright future ahead of him. Kong Wuxia isn't bad either. At the end of the year, he also became a commandant of the imperial army. In the end, only Li Hanlin is left in Bailiang. Do you really have the heart to do that? You haven't even become a vassal king, yet you plan to become a loner?" Su Fengyan said calmly, "No matter what the result is, even if it is the worst, I will ensure that the Li family will never have to worry about food or clothing. Li Hanlin not acknowledging me as a brother is also my own fault." Su Beiji smiled faintly and said, "How pitiful." Su Fengyan kicked this fellow. Su Beiji leaned against the wall of the carriage and patted his clothes. He asked casually, "That good friend of Wang Lifting, Sun Yin, was praised by Yao Baifeng as a talented bull. Yao Baifeng became the left chancellor of the Imperial College and controls the literary world. Did any spies say that Master wanted to invite Sun Yin to be the chancellor?" Su Fengyan laughed and said, "Zhu Zi, you're really something. If I didn't know that Yao Baifeng had secretly sent someone to invite Sun Yin and promised that as long as this fellow was willing to go to the capital and become the chancellor of the Imperial College, he would be able to participate in the court examinations next year. Yao Baifeng would have put down his precious face and personally asked the Zhao family's emperor for the top spot. If not, I wouldn't have known that there was such a person in Huangnam County. However, you can relax, but you can't. Sun Yin has already been sent to Lingzhou by Wang Lifting. I plan to let him become a 6th rank official with real power. If you become the provincial governor of Lingzhou and are overshadowed by this person, be careful that I don't let him replace your position in a fit of anger." Su Beiji glanced at Su Fengyan and didn't say anything. Su Fengyan smiled. Don't worry. I like the new and not the old. No matter how capable Sun Yin is, Zhu Zi, you're still my old love. My favor won't decrease." Su Beiji laughed coldly. "Stop the car quickly. Let me go out and vomit." Su Fengyan looked hurt. "You don't understand. I saved all the good stuff for you first. I picked up a heavenly blue gall bottle from the Dongyue Imperial Kiln at the Peach Cheeks restaurant. There's no other bottle like it in the world. You really don't want it? Then I'll give it to Chun Shiliang. That fellow is more sensible than you." Su Beiji closed his eyes to rest and said calmly, "Hurry up." At noon on New Year's Eve, His Royal Highness was finally seen on Mount Qingliang, which was already decorated with lanterns and colored banners. Su Fengyan arranged for Hu Yingguanin to stay in a quiet courtyard. He didn't plan on letting her meet up with the girls from Wutangen. Su Xiao accompanied them along the way. He didn't say much and was just happy. His younger brother, Huang Man'er, had grown a few centimeters taller. There was a hint of anger between his eyebrows. When he wasn't smiling, he was abnormally heroic and exuberant. However, when he smiled foolishly with his father, this instantly broke down. Fortunately, he no longer drooled, but this still left Su Fengnian speechless. When they went to see second sister, the family of four finally reunited. Su Weisheng, who controlled half of Bailiang's spies, was now living in Wutangyuan so that he could handle confidential affairs. In Wutangyuan, apart from the two senior maids, Sweet Potato and Bluebird, who didn't participate, the other two maids had all become Bailiang's female handlin. They read and sift through military intelligence and spy reports and had the right to approve them. Those in the know called them Vermilion's maids. This was especially true for Lu Yi, who was second only to Su Weisheng in the 19 ways. It was as if she was born to be good at scheming and planning and had become the second in command of Wutangyuan. The second Junju, who demanded perfection, reprimanded almost all of the maids, but she relied heavily on Lu Yi. The three men of the Su family entered the room in Wutangyuan. Su Weisheng sat in a wheelchair behind a low desk that was specially made for her. She raised her head and glanced at the three of them. She then lowered her head and casually pulled out a copy from a large stack of secret reports that had already been approved. She inspected the Vermilion's maids in the neighboring rooms to see if they had made any mistakes. Su Fengnian jogged over and saw that the ink on the ancient inkstone on the table was a little dry. He immediately squatted down beside the wheelchair and turned his head to flatter her. "Sister, I'll grind the ink for you." Su Weisheng didn't even turn her head to look at him. She smiled insincerely and said, "How could I let the Lingzhou general do this for me?" Su Fengnian played dumb and said, Of course, of course." Su Weisheng didn't continue to make sarcastic remarks about His Royal Highness. She allowed him to roll his sleeves and grind the ink, while she focused on reading the detailed Vermilion's handwriting on the various court reports and Bailiang's own spy reports. Su Xiao smiled knowingly. Su Longxiang sat down on the doorstep and held his chin in a daze. Su Weisheng probably couldn't stand Su Fengnian being in the way. She didn't even raise her head and said, "Didn't you see that we haven't put up the spring festival couplets and peach talismans?" Su Fengnian slapped his head and said in realization, "I'll go write the couplets right now. Let's put them up together later." Su Weisheng didn't make a sound. Su Fengnian went to the empty desk next door and began writing rapidly. It still took him an hour to finish writing the 100 spring festival couplets that the prince's estate needed. Every time he finished writing one, Su Xiao and Su Longxiang would gently dry them. Then they would call Su Weisheng. She still had work to do and told him not to wait for her. Su Fengnian and Huang Manor could only each carry 50 or so spring festival couplets. Su Xiao was responsible for carrying a box of slightly lighter couplets. They began to put up couplets from top to bottom on Mount Qingliang. When they reached the main gate, they found Su Weisheng sitting in a wheelchair, quietly waiting outside the gate. Su Fengnian smiled and asked Su Xiao to see if the couplets were crooked. He and Su Longxiang put up especially wide and large spring festival couplets. The two brothers finished putting up the couplets at the same time. When they turned around, they saw Su Xiao smiling from ear to ear. Second sister also had a smile that she hadn't seen in a long time. Chapter 924. After pasting the spring festival couplets on the main gate, Su Weisheng returned to Wutangyuan, leaving the three masters to wander around the prince's manor. Su Fengnian and Su Xiao talked about the affairs of Lingzhou in bits and pieces. Su Xiao occasionally talked about some interesting news that had recently happened in the imperial court. For example, Gu Jiantang's son-in-law went on a killing spree in Jizhou. Now, the imperial censors and civil officials were too lazy to scold him, Su Xiao. They turned their heads and scolded General Gu, who had lost his position as Minister of War. In any case, Gu Jiantang was no longer in the capital. The originally aggressive Gu Hut in the Ministry of War was like a group of dragons without a leader. Outside of the censorate and the Ministry of War, the other 5 departments were all jumping around vigorously. This made the members of the Gu faction in the imperial court dejected and very tired of dealing with them. This year was not going to be easy. There was also the Imperial College's left chancellor, Yao Baifeng, teaching the second-in-command, Jin Lanting, a harsh lesson. This even alarmed the emperor, who personally went to the imperial college to be a peacemaker. Only then did he barely manage to settle the matter. The situation within the imperial college was well known to everyone. The townspeople had formed their own associations, and most of them were advocating for Jin Sanlang. This was also why Yao Baifeng would say that the gentlemen of today like to have friends. Su Xiao also said that the crown prince of Yanqi, Zhao Zhu, was not a well-behaved person. Leading thousands of elite riders all the way up north, he did not look like he was going to pacify the situation. He was clearly busy showing off his strength. The few provinces he passed by were all in turmoil. Before he even reached Guangling Road, where Zhao Yi was, he had already caused all the officials along the way to complain incessantly. Memorials complaining and impeaching flew into the imperial palace like snowflakes. The three of them walked to the side of Tidehark Lake. Su Xiao suddenly came to his senses. He said he was going to listen to Wang Chudong's storytelling and missed the time. That girl put on airs and was not willing to chat with an old man like him. Su Xiao hurriedly jogged over. Seeing this, Su Fengyan was dumbfounded. It looked like Wang Dongxiang, who was second in the Yinji Academy, was indeed formidable. Even Su Xiao, who was most afraid of dealing with books, was subdued. Previously, a letter from home had been sent to Lingzhou. Su Xiao had said that Wang Chudong was very witty and clever. She was not afraid of an old brute like him at all. She gave him a lesson the moment they met. Acting like an elder, she told him, the illiterate king of Bailiang, that reading was actually very interesting and not boring at all. She told Su Xiao to read official history. Winners were kings and losers were bandits, so it was better to read unofficial history. Reading about scholars and beauties was the same. No matter how many twists and turns there were, they would eventually grow old together. In reality, it could not compare to reading classics. It was like seeing an old gentleman sitting upright from start to finish. You would feel that he had been rigid for too long, but one day you would feel that he had his own adorable aspects. Other than that, Wang Chudong also said that reading military books and poetry books was different. Su Fengyan felt great admiration. This girl was really daring to teach Su Xiao how to read. It had to be said that neither Li Yishan nor Zhao Chongling had been able to get Su Xiao to read more books in the past. Su Fengyan looked up at Tide Listening Pavilion. Chun Shiliang should be in the side room on the top floor right now. Everyone in the Wang Fu said that this young man was increasingly similar to that state scholar who had died without a grave. Su Fengyan looked away and saw Su Juzi sitting alone in the pavilion, throwing a large amount of bait into the lake. The koi fish rolled in a grand scene. Su Fengyan squatted at the edge of Tide Listening Pavilion's platform and said to Huang Man, beside him, Lucio said that the section of willow whose body I tore apart did not die. He probably used an unorthodox chi cultivator's ability to cunningly escape before he died. I think that this person's identity is not as simple as a spider's web. It's fine. We will definitely have a chance to interact with him in the future. Huang Man nodded earnestly. Su Fengyan said self-deprecatingly, I'm puzzled. That section of willow was like that, but that little celestial master who changed his name from Zhao Jingxi to Zhao Ningxin was also difficult to deal with. He was suppressed half to death at the Spring Lake. I originally wanted to use him as a useless person to make the Taoist ancestral court unhappy. I didn't expect that when I returned to Mount Longhu, I heard that Zhao Ningxin's realm had advanced by leaps and bounds again. The young chief of Wudong, Liu Fu, killed the evil dragon at Mount Xiafei and became famous all over the world. The old celestial master, Zhao Shi, who had been in seclusion for many years, did not stay idle either. He built the Jade Emperor Tower that was as famous as the Great Yellow Court. His ascension was imminent, and countless people had already gone to Mount Longhu to worship him. Even the crown prince, Zhao Zhuan, went to Huizhou to watch the show in disguise. It's very likely that it's true. And that heartless woman from Mount Huizhou, who became the chief of Wulin, changed her attitude faster than flipping a book. She said that after sending the copies of Mount Huizhou's secret manuals to Bailiang, she would draw a clear line with me. Su Fingyin turned his head and patted Huang Manor's head. He smiled gently and said, "Let's not talk about these annoying things. Huang Manor, you don't have to worry about anything. Father and your brother are here." "That's right. Ever since your brother seized and transported back the 4 talisman general armors from the Xianxia reed marshes, he began to let the Mahish giants in Bailiang's machine-making bureau work to restore it to the level of Great Grandmaster Yi Hongting's number 1 talisman armor. Last time at the Iron Gate Pass, the golden armor was also in our hands. Moreover, this time, from the killer cat outside Shenwu City, I learned some secrets from Han Diaoxi's skull through suing. One of them was the details of how he skinned Yi Hongting. After the new year, I will go to the machine-making bureau and tell those giants the details of the process. In the future, when you put on that talisman armor and charge into enemy lines, at least you don't have to worry too much about being killed by a section of willow." Also, Huang Manor, on the Great Bull Hill, Xinyuan Jingcheng once said that you can't easily enter the Xian Finger realm. You must remember, other than helping you make the talisman armor, I'm also flipping through some obscure secret manuals of Buddhism and Taoism in the building. That white fox face also agreed to help me find it. So you have to wait for your brother to find a shortcut that will let you smoothly become a Xian Finger expert. Before that, even if the sky falls down, you can't enter the Xian Finger realm. Do you remember? By now, Huang Manor wasn't stupid. His intuition told him that he couldn't agree, and he wasn't in the habit of lying to his brother. All he did was raise his head and nod without saying a word. The young man with polychoria moved his eyes, but didn't dare to look at his brother. Su Fingyin knocked Su Longxiang on the head with a chestnut. "Nod your head for your brother." Su Longxiang turned his back to Su Fingyin and, for the first time, didn't agree to his brother's request. Su Fingyin tugged at Huang Manor's ear for a long time, but couldn't get his Vajra realm brother to turn his head. With a sigh, he let go of his hand and stared blankly at Tide Hark Lake, which had calmed down after Su Beiji's departure. Huang Manor turned around and sat cross-legged on the ground. He reached out and gently stroked his brother's eye-catching grayish-white hair. Su Fingyin narrowed his eyes and gazed into the distance. There were fish in Tide Hark Lake every year, and there was an abundance of Bailiang every year. Su Fingyin laid down slowly and rested the back of his head on his hand. He gazed at the clear sky and fell asleep peacefully. He had never told Su Xiao that when he saw his father's silhouette on the Spring God Lake. Even though he knew that the silhouette was getting older and hunchbacked with age, he could still see the emperor, Wang Xianji, Zhang Julu, and Yuan Bunchi from afar. Su Fingyin wasn't the least bit afraid of these fellows appearing together on the lake. He felt very at ease. Too much stronger tiger Kuei scuttled out with a whoosh and ran towards Su Fingyin with all their might. In the end, Huang Manor pressed them down to the ground with one hand each. The two strange beasts were only a few feet away from Su Fingyin, yet they couldn't escape from Huang Manor's palms. Their gazes actually contained a hint of hidden bitterness. Su Fingyin smiled and said, "Huang Manor, go play by yourself. Bring Bodhisattva and Vajra with you. I still need to sit here for a while and think about something." Huang Manor grinned and nodded. He dragged the 2 tiger Kuei with him and ran far away. Huang Manor strolled around. After letting go of the tiger Kuei for the first time, the pair of siblings wanted to run back to Tide Listening Pavilion to look for Su Fingyin. However, Huang Manor, who walked as fast as lightning, grabbed their tails. After suffering a few times, they could only follow behind him sickly. He unknowingly arrived outside the walls of Wutangen. In the end, he found that his father didn't go to listen to the story of that sister-in-law. Instead, he pushed the wheelchair and took his second sister to relax. When Su Xiao saw Huang Manor, he waved his hand. When the female tiger Kuei called Bodhisattva saw Su Weisheng, she seemed particularly affectionate and lively. Su Xiao continued the previous topic and slowly said, "In the future, you, as the older sister, have to keep an eye on the matter of Bailiang's official consort. Xianxia knows what she's doing. Father isn't just more at ease, he's the most at ease. It's only when it comes to matters of the heart that this child easily disregards the consequences once he falls in. Wei Xiong, it's not that I'm worried about the military and politics of Bailiang being affected. I've worked so hard to build up such a large family business. If in the end, my son can't even afford to squander it, then how am I supposed to be a general? How am I supposed to be the king of Bailiang after the new year? It's just that I'm very afraid that you, my younger brother, will get hurt. I'm a rough man, but I've seen many people come and go. I also know that this kind of invisible injury is more hurtful than a serious injury caused by a knife or arrow. Perhaps you won't be able to recover from it for the rest of your life. Su Weisheng grunted in acknowledgement. Chapter 925. Then there are the future concubines. To be honest, of the two women that have been temporarily decided, Wang Chudong, who is already in the Fu, and Lu Qingyan, who is in Qingzhou, father does like the little girl Wang Chudong more. However, there are different ranks of concubines. Wang Chudong can only be after Lu Qingyan. After all, the Lu family is full of talents. Compared to Wang Linquan, who relied on Chu Lushan to climb to the position of the richest man in Qingzhou, Wang Chudong is definitely more important to Bailiang in the future. Therefore, in the future, if there is a dispute between the two families, as long as it doesn't involve major issues, you have to side with the Lu family. This can be considered father's compensation to Lu Qingyan as his daughter-in-law, because father knows that Xianxia may not be able to open her heart to this poor woman in this lifetime. Treating each other with respect only sounds good, but for a married couple who will spend the rest of their lives together, it is actually a kind of suffering. Father has been going to Wang Chudong's place every day to listen to her stories. First, it is interesting. Second, it is an opportunity to let Bailiang know that this girl is the first daughter-in-law that Su Xiao approves of. In the future, if anyone wants to use the Wang family as a stepping stone to curry favor with the Lu family, they have to first consider whether their flattery will backfire. As for Pei Nanwei, father knows that you don't like this Princess Jing'an. You don't have to go against your heart and deliberately interact with her. Just let her be. In this world, there's only the saying that the elder brother is like the father and the elder sister-in-law is like the mother. There is no such thing as the elder sister taking care of the family. The reason why father nags you about this and wants you to bear this thankless responsibility is because father is selfish. He is afraid that Xianxia won't have any relatives to take care of her, so you can't marry in this lifetime. Wei Xiong, if you want to resent father, father will accept it. Father is a man who values boys over girls. He dares to take responsibility for his actions. Even when I was living with your mother, even if I had to brace myself, I would still say it so bluntly. Before Jihu was born, he was beaten by your mother. After Jihu was born, he was beaten so badly that it was unbearable to look at. Your mother made father, a rough man who was used to holding swords, spears, and sticks to carry the child. No matter how much father loved his daughter, he couldn't bear the fact that the child insisted on crying. Your mother was reasonable to everyone, but she was unreasonable to your father. There were several times when I had to attend a military meeting every other day. I went to the tent with a bloody nose and a swollen face, and those bastards laughed at me. There was once an old brother who made a mistake and was personally whipped by father. This guy stared at father's swollen forehead from being whipped by your mother and even fucking knelt there and laughed foolishly. Father was so angry that he whipped him 50 more times. Later, when father went to apply medicine for his sore wounds, he actually laughed at father and said that no matter how embarrassing he was not as embarrassing as me. This old brother was Chun Jibao's father. Other than his young son, he was the one who led all the Chun family's descendants to their deaths. Father was not the kind of scoundrel who could be so shameless as to give a meritorious official a death-free gold medallion while craftily fabricating a crime of treason. If we said that we would be brothers, then we would be brothers for life. It was father who owed the Chun family first. Therefore, even though he knew that Chun Jibao would not accept Xianxia as the new Prince of Liang, he did not care about him for more than 10 years and allowed his adopted son to cultivate trusted aides. If Chun Jibao wanted to leave Bailiang, father would not stop him. If he wanted to be both the Minister of War and the Prince of Shu, it would be up to him. Father did not wish for the day when he and Xianxia would fall out and become enemies to the point where they would have to meet on the battlefield. It would be best if they could not have any contact with each other. However, Father knew that the group of old foxes Zhang Jiulu and Gu Jiantang, as well as the emperor of the Zhao family who was hiding behind the scenes, would not let such a sharp spear rust in vain and not point the tip of the spear at Bailiang. Speaking of this, the old man, who had been in the military all his life, was somewhat sorrowful. Su Xiao smiled and turned his head to his second son, Su Longxiang, and said, "Huang Man'er, you will be enlightened sooner or later. You must remember that your older brother is good to you. That time when your older brother got into big trouble and Father wanted to beat him, you came out to stop him. You were angry at Father and looked like you wanted to fight Father to the death. Father only pretended to be angry on the surface, but in fact, he was very happy. Your older brother has not been happy these years. Outsiders think that because he is Su Xiao, the eldest son of the butcher's first wife, he will definitely be in the limelight. You will only understand the bitterness of it when you are enlightened. Losing his mother and sister is nothing. In the Great War of the Spring and Autumn period, countless people in his family died. However, he was cursed by people for 18 generations and had to guard the gate for these heartless bastards. Perhaps one day, he would have to sacrifice the lives of hundreds of thousands of his steel cavalry in exchange for peace of mind. Later, when the Central Plains changed masters, he would be cursed and scolded by the new masters in the history books. Furthermore, there would be a large group of scholars and common people who had never suffered any hardship. This is the most pitiful part of your brother. In his youth, before his Royal Highness chose to hide, the entire Bailiang Palace knew that His Highness doted on His Royal Highness from the bottom of his heart. As long as there was something fun, no matter how precious or rare it was, it would be sent to Huang Manor before it was warmed up. However, when good things were in the hands of Huang Manor, who was astonishingly strong and did not know the severity of the situation, how could they be complete? It would only take a few moves for them to be broken. The people in the manor who cleaned up the mess had never seen His Royal Highness angry. Even when His Royal Highness began to live a dissolute life with a notorious reputation, he still did not neglect Su Longxiang. The servants were rarely whipped in the prince's mansion. Su Fengyan had gotten angry a few times because he knew that the servants were deliberately teasing the young prince. In those times, His Highness the Heir Apparent had personally punched and kicked the servants to death, without showing the slightest mercy. Chapter 926. Also, Wei Xiong, I know you care a lot about Xianxia, but you're cold on the outside but warm on the inside. Sometimes you just have to smile at him and he'll be very happy. A few years ago, he went to Mount Wudong to practice his saber art. You did not like him to practice martial art, because you were afraid that he would delay your hereditary inheritance. He was even more afraid that you would be unhappy. Therefore, when he picked up the pebbles from the bottom of the deep pool one by one, and chopped them one by one, he made more than 300 chess pieces for you. As soon as you saw him, you threw the 2 boxes of chess pieces all over the ground. After that, he personally picked them up. Some of them rolled into Tide Listening Lake, and he spent the whole night picking them up. Father and Ishan watched him in Tide Listening Pavilion for the whole night. Even Ishan, such a cold-hearted guy, ended up drinking to drown his sorrows. When you were young, didn't Xianxia do many things to make you happy? He clearly knew that Jihu doted on him, but he still helped you in everything. After Jihu left, do you think he felt good? Who saw him tearing his heart and lungs apart with their own eyes? Originally, with his temperament, he would have gone to Mount Wudong to pay respects to the old chief, Wang Zhonglo, in gratitude. He was afraid of Mount Wudong, afraid of that Lotus Peak. He was afraid that he would be a scourge, afraid that the people around him would leave because of him. Fengyan had always given his favorite things to his sister or brother since he was young. The things he kept for himself were only things that outsiders would find valuable. Su Weisheng lowered his head, his expression unreadable. In today's world, people in high positions cherish their lives and reputation. The more they read, the smarter they become. Each one of them is so smart that they don't seem human anymore. Who would be willing to carry the coffin of an old soldier who has no relatives or friends? Who would be willing to guard the city gate for a maidservant in a foreign land with no one to rely on? Ishan is such a smart person. So why is his vision so high that even Qin Jibao doesn't think highly of him and instead thinks highly of him? Why did old Huang leave without any attachments on his trip to martial Emperor City? Why was it that Li Chungang had clearly fought with Wang Xianji and was still willing to use the Battle of Guangling River as the closing battle of his Jianghu career? Why was it that Huan Wan, who was now the second assistant, who had always spoken a few words of justice for the Bailiang, now went against his conscience and did not hesitate to tamper with the transport of grain, racking his brains to make things difficult for the Bailiang? It wasn't that Feng Nian's talent in martial arts was higher than those rare great grandmasters in Jianghu. It wasn't that Feng Nian's intelligence was so great that it was close to demonic. In fact, it was very simple. As long as he sincerely treated people as people and slowly gathered the people's hearts, he would win the overall situation. Back in the day, Dad had gone step by step from a ruffian in the marketplace to a little lieutenant who dared to fight and risk his life. Then he became a general who could easily massacre cities. In the end, he became the king of Bailiang with hundreds of thousands of cavalry. Along the way, he had stumbled and stumbled. In the eyes of many smart people who didn't think highly of Dad, he had made it this far. Dad's opponents, the later they got, the smarter and harder to deal with. But many of these smart people died without understanding why Dad had the last laugh. Dad believed that most of them could only comfort themselves before they closed their eyes that this was the will of the heavens, and that Su Zhao's life was too tough. This saying was both correct and incorrect. Dad wasn't very literate, but he knew one thing. If you didn't let anyone down, many people might not understand. Or perhaps they understood, but didn't care. They might even treat you like a fool, thinking that they had taken advantage of you. This didn't matter. In the end, there would still be people who would remember. Even if there weren't many people who remembered, they would all be willing to put in effort and then fight to the death. Even if it was 1 against 2, he would still be unrivaled. If he lost, it didn't matter. He could still make a comeback. There were more than 600 memorial tablets below the Tide Listening Pavilion, as well as Feng Yin's old soldiers respectfully sending him off before he entered the capital. All of this was proof. Therefore, Dad was more certain than anyone that the Bailiang in the future would be even more of a headache for Bei Meng than when it was in Dad's hands. When her father was still young, it wasn't that he didn't want to be a stable rich man. That way, he could at least give his children a peaceful life. But Qin Jibao was good at everything, except that he was too smart. Once a smart person made a mistake, it would be a huge mistake that no one could reverse. Feng Yin was also smart, but he was far better at listening to others than Qin Jibao. Now that Dad was dead, Qin Jibao wouldn't put anyone in his eyes, nor would he believe that anyone was qualified to be on equal footing with him. If one day he wanted to become emperor, he wouldn't hesitate to sacrifice all of the Bailiang cavalry to achieve his goal. After Li Yishan's death, Su Xiao didn't even seem to be able to deceive himself and others. At this point, the hunchbacked old man couldn't hide his weariness. He stopped talking and gently reached out to help Huang Man or tidy up his collar. Finally, he said softly, "Huang Man, in the future, don't risk your life so easily. If you die and your brother survives, how sad would he be? Dad will tell you. He would be even sadder than if he were alive. But you still have to do more things that can make your brother's life easier. Although your brother was reincarnated into the Su family earlier than you, so he is destined to bear the burden. In the future, in Mount Xingliang, the only man left in the Su family who can talk to him is you. No matter if it's Su Beiji or Chen Shiliang, no matter how loyal they are, they're still not as close as family members. Huang Man, this is the first time your brother left home in a fit of anger to travel to Jianghu. His greatest wish wasn't to become a hero, but to snatch back a great beauty for you. When you went to Mount Longhu, every time you received a letter, your brother, who has a photographic memory, clearly knew that it wasn't written by you, but he still read it over and over again. Wei Sheng, this time when he saw you sitting in a wheelchair, you purposely didn't look at him grinding ink, but Dad saw that his hand was constantly shaking. The old man reached out, and patted Su Weisheng's head, but didn't say any words of comfort. Su Longxiang clenched his fists tightly, his eyes resolute. The two tiger kuei were so frightened that they instantly fled. They paced back and forth in the distance restlessly, not daring to approach the unfamiliar black-clothed youth. The old man slowly walked back to the courtyard. The loquat tree was still green in the winter, but the old man stood alone, all alone. But the old man wasn't sad. He smiled and said, "Wife, our Su family has already been supported by Fengyan. Wait for me. I won't make you wait too long." Chapter 927. The Bailiang Palace was plastered with the word Fu that was deliberately pasted upside down. The New Year's Eve dinner was very simple, just dumplings. Su Fengyan and Su Longxiang dragged along Su Beiji and Chun Shiliang to cook and make dumplings together. Wang Chudong and the other girls had no place to show their talents. After the meal, Su Fengyan had two strategists chat with Su Xiao while he himself went to the deserted mausoleum. When he returned, a large group of people sat in the Wutongyan to celebrate the new year. Everyone was happy and harmonious. The Vermilion maidservants near the house only had half a day of free time, so they went to the house one after another to read the mountain of intelligence reports. The little girl that Chen Shiliang had brought to Bailiang had already fallen asleep in his arms. Su Fengyan asked him to bring the little girl back to rest first. Chen Shiliang did not insist. Wang Chudong, who loved hibernation the most, was also sitting there and dozing off. Su Fengyan half-carried and half-supported her as they left the Wutongyan. When Su Fengyan returned to the courtyard, Su Weisheng had also gone to the house to deal with important military matters. Only Su Beiji, an outsider, was left. Su Xiao, an old fellow who used to be a pillar of the country and a great general of the military, was asking the young man about the level of an official. Su Beiji was not afraid at all. Su Xiao nodded repeatedly in agreement. After Su Fengyan sat down, Zhu Zi had already explained from the lowest level to the highest, from the 19th level to the 16th level. Su Beiji was unable to win against Su Royal Highness, so he could only roughly explain it again. Those who relied on their ancestors to benefit from their glory, lying on the family tree and becoming a low-paid official, were called Sunzi officials. Those who only knew how to bark and never did anything were called toad officials. Those who were vicious and crafty, bullied the weak and feared the strong, lowered their heads when they saw the powerful, and roared when they saw the common people, were called dog officials. Those who followed the rules and did not do anything, and were not careless when it came to reaping benefits. However, they did not know how to avoid disaster and were called corpse officials. Su Fengyan smiled and asked what level the Su Li of Lingzhou were at. Su Beiji replied that they were fox officials and were good at reading people. Su Fengyan asked in reply, "Are those county magistrates and military officers with real power who instigated Su Li to stir up the evil wind and rain?" Su Beiji smiled and nodded. He also added, "Ghost officials who did all the bad things behind the scenes, but rarely came out." The common people who did not know their background still thought they were officials. Officials were the best officials were the best officials. They could be considered officials who did not know their background, but they were officials who did not know the was. Su Fengyan continued to ask, "Then what level is the governor of Longqing County, Zhong Cheng, at?" Zhong Qingxin is on the 15th floor. In my opinion, there is nothing easier than being an official in the world. Do not be greedy or take advantage of others, and progress step by step. There are aides and officials to give advice and suggestions, and the situation is in order. You could be a shopkeeper who does not do anything, and there is no harm in only caring about the flowers, snow, and moon. Generally speaking, you live in harmony with the common people. Then Huangnam County's merit officer, Wang Shihua, their government affairs are mediocre, but their reputation is extremely good. They have never been greedy or harmed people. If there is a good government, they will definitely do their best to help. As for the subordinates, they treat the people as if they are their own children. This is also the kind of honest and upright official that ordinary people want the most. This kind of official is on the 16th level. The size of their contributions depends on whether their master is wise or not. The overall situation is clear, and the subordinates follow suit. Their official position will naturally rise with the tide. If the situation is dirty, this kind of official can only hang up his crown and leave sooner or later, boasting that he will not bend over for 5 bushels of rice or pick chrysanthemums under the eastern fence. It is not that they do not want to be officials, but that they do not have the ability to turn the tide. They can only take a step back, cherish their reputation, and retreat at the top of the tide. Officials who have left their names in history are all like this. Of course, they have to leave behind a few poems that are popular among the people. In the books, there were many officials who were highly praised by later generations, but in fact, they did not see the big picture. Their actions were of no help to the situation of the world. They were just martyrs seeking favor. If they met a stupid emperor, they would let them succeed. If they met a cunning emperor, especially one who was narrow-minded, as long as they played a little trick, they could make them depressed for the rest of their lives. From Su Beiji's point of view, Wang Xihua is not suitable to be the county governor of Huangnam County. Instead, he is like Huan Wen, who went to the Imperial College, who hides his strength and bides his time. When the time is right, he will be able to amaze the world. What is the position of Song Yan, who is going to be your assistant in Lingzhou? The 16th level, capable officer. They're not very good at seeking fame, but their methods of currying favor in the officialdom are not bad. The main point is that they can govern the territory well and make it flourish. Their vision is very high, and they can see the situation outside of the first 15 levels of officials. However, they're actually concerned about the common people. It is just that this kind of person is destined to reach a certain rank in the officialdom. Unless they meet a noble in the court, they will not be able to move an inch. Not to mention other things, just the common people who are inevitably short-sighted due to their family background and position may scold these officials when they are in office. In fact, since ancient times, many of the actions that have benefited hundreds of generations and contributed thousands of years have come from this generation of officials. Su Xiao, who had not spoken this entire time, peeled a yellow mandarin and asked with a light smile, "Beiji, then you comment on Li Gongda." Su Beiji still said straightforwardly, he can't compare to an honest and upright official who is also greedy. He can't compare to an incapable officer who is capable and can do things well. In general, he can take care of both sides and can be considered a good official. The administrator is already an outstanding talent in this level of officials. If it weren't for the fact that he is somewhat narrow-minded, he could have been promoted to another level. He has the ability to be a prime minister, but he doesn't have the bearing of a prime minister. He is fine as the administrator in Beiyang, but if he went to the court to occupy an important position, he would be like a calf pulling a large plow. I'm afraid that he would spoil a great matter. Su Xiao nodded and handed the peeled yellow mandarin to Su Fengyan. In that case, Bayener can be considered a cornerstone officials of a dynasty. There is no problem with cultivating the body and governing the country. He even personally opened up a new situation under the heavens. Is he the 18th or the 19th in the end? Su Beiji took the half of the mandarin that Su Fengyan gave him and stuffed a piece into his mouth. He smiled and said, 18. Su Xiao sank into deep thought. Su Fengyan broke the silence and laughed loudly. Su Xiao, you really don't know what's good for you. If you say 18, then there will only be 19 left. Zhu Zi put in so much effort to leave you, such a big bootlicker. You, on the other hand, have your horse's head turned to our Zhu Zi. How is this fellow supposed to bootlick you? Su Xiao was stunned and felt a little awkward. He smiled apologetically and said, I always thought that I was at the level of a ghost official at the very most. Beiji, I'm sorry. Su Beiji smiled and shook his head. After eating the mandarin, he took his leave. He had just stepped out when a fat pig followed him and rolled into the room. Su Fengyan immediately raised his hand and shouted, Shut up. The fat man forcefully swallowed the sobs that were about to escape his mouth. Su Xiao waved his hand and said, Lu Shan, take a seat. Chu Lu Shan, who had been promoted to grade 2 Beiyang Protector General, smiled and rubbed his hands. He sat down on the floor that was not cold, even though the floor was covered with floor tiles. He had a guilty look on his face and said softly, "Godfather, I'm here to ask for forgiveness from His Highness and the second princess. However, it's the new year, and Lucio is topless. I'm afraid it'll bring bad luck." Su Fengyin said helplessly, "It's fine as long as you know what's going on with Songgu. There's no one smarter than you in the world. Also, don't go to my sister's side and annoy her." Chu Lushan sighed and did not say anything else. Upon hearing this, Su Weisheng walked out of the room and said coldly to Chu Lushan, "You're the Protector General of Bailiang. Aren't you bored of doing those petty and dirty things for half a year?" Chu Lushan shrunk his neck that was so short that it was almost invisible. He did not dare talk back. In fact, back in the days of the Su family, eldest Princess Su Weisheng had always hated this fat man. On the other hand, Su Weisheng did not have any prejudice against him. Su Weisheng turned to Su Xiao and said, "Father, I'll make a secret assessment of the Bailiang officials' levels that Su Beiji mentioned. It will not be made public. It will only be given to Fengyin for reference." Su Xiao nodded. Su Fengyin asked in a low voice, "Lucio, what kind of heinous business did you do to make my sister so angry? Did the peregrine falcon and the eagle guard gang up on you?" Chu Lushan said embarrassedly, "I wouldn't dare. It's just a little joke when I'm bored. It's not worth mentioning." The more secretive Chu Lushan was, the more curious Su Fengyin became. He asked, "Tell me about it." Chu Lushan scratched his head and said carefully, "In the past, Lucio was in charge of the spies in Bailiang. Therefore, Lucio knew a little about some of your highness's 3 trips. On the 3rd trip to Beimang, foster father told me more, so..." Su Fengyin laughed and scolded, "Spit out." Chapter 928. Chu Lushan had probably come to the realization that if he stretched out his head, he would also be stabbed if he retracted his head. He spilled the beans from a bamboo tube, leaving Su Fengyin speechless. It turned out that the current situation in Bailiang was vaguely unstable, and there was a clamor everywhere. After Chu Lushan became the Protector General of Bailiang, he did not make any big moves. The more he felt that he had nothing to do, the more he randomly picked up a few unlucky fellows and threw them into the whisking room, giving them a miserable beating. Among these fellows, there were villagers, scholars, officials, Jianghu people, and soldiers. 7 or 8 of them were the type that could not keep their mouths shut. They were similar to Su Fengyin when he heard Skinny Monkey and the others boasting in the restaurant some time ago. Even if he heard them, His Royal Highness would not be bothered to make a fuss about it. However, it was clear that Chu Lushan did not have such a good temper. He sent them all to the whisking room, and according to Chu Lushan's imaginative and meticulous plan, he began to make them suffer a fate worse than death. One of the villagers, who was in the prime of his life, gathered a group of people to drink wine and said that Su Fengyin, the heir of Bailiang, was too easy to be. He had never suffered in his life, and His Royal Highness lived a life of luxury. How could it be as difficult as in burning charcoal and taking care of the crops in the mountains? In the end, when he arrived at the whisking room, he was stabbed more than 160 times. The number and severity of each stab were different. After he was injured, he would immediately apply top-grade wound medicine. During this period, he would be served with fine wine and beautiful women. After he recovered, he would be stabbed again and again. The reason why there were so many stab wounds was not because Chu Lushan had set this rule for no reason. Instead, it was based on the number of stab wounds that His Royal Highness had received before he came to Mount Wudong. He had received 16 stab wounds, including the Eastern Yuandaraj that Wudong's enemy, Princess Sui Zhuzdong Yuandaraj, the Reed's Marsh, the Duckhead Green Forest, the Ro Ran Mountains, the Fifth Raccoon, the Taimen Pass, the Divine Martial City, and the Lu Hao Shi. Before Chu Lushan sent them to the whisking room, he told them that as long as they suffered enough, according to their different backgrounds, they would each receive 100,000 taels of silver, a rank 7 official, and so on. If they could not endure, they would be released. In the end, without exception, no one was able to withstand more than 200 strikes. The 2 strong-willed men of Jianghu were unable to withstand the strike from the saber that was stabbed diagonally into their abdomens. They shouted that they did not want to be the grandmasters of the Northern Liang sect, who had founded their own sect. This saber strike was an imitation of Bo Air's lightning spear that was stabbed into the abdomen. Among the 7 or 8 people, the scholars all left crying for their parents after the stab. Surprisingly, this villager was the one who could grit his teeth and endure. It was a pity that he could not endure it. This was because the whisking room did not tell him how many stab wounds were needed. Not to mention them, even the whisking room did not know. Only Chu Lushan knew. These people did not die in the whisking room. After they returned home safely, those who had mothers lost their mothers, those who did not have mothers lost their fathers, those who had elder sisters lost their elder sisters, and those who did not have elder sisters lost their younger sisters. Not only that, some of their good brothers lost their arms and legs. Afterwards, they were all blamed for being implicated by them. Some scholars who valued their reputation became disreputable hypocrites. In short, what they cared about the most, Chu Lushan, made them lose it. Chu Lushan's ruthlessness was that when these people were on the verge of going crazy, he asked the whisking room's spies to appear in front of them and said that he would give them another chance. In the end, no one was willing to agree. After that, there was no after because Chu Lushan killed them. Chu Lushan, who was sitting on the ground, had a calm expression. He laughed softly and said, "Before they died, I told them that in the past, they complained that they did not have a good family background. In fact, they were not afraid of suffering at all. Therefore, I gave them chance." His Royal Highness's injuries in the past few years, excluding the different states of His Royal Highness's physique, and based on the physical strength of the person who received the stab, the amount of pain they suffered was actually very little. According to the order, it was only 314 stab wounds. Su Xiao threw a piece of orange into his mouth and laughed it off. Su Fengyin frowned and said the same words as Su Weisheng. "Aren't you bored?" Chu Lushan raised his head and smiled brightly. He shook his head. Su Fengyin said calmly, "In the future, don't do such things that harm one's virtue." Chu Lushan, who was obedient to His Royal Highness, said for the first time, "It's fine if I don't see or hear them. If I, Chu Lushan, see them, I will take care of them." The whisking room does not lack torture tools and people. Some newbies need some practice anyway. Su Fengyin turned his head and stared at Chu Lushan. He said slowly, "They're all Bailiang people." Chu Lushan restrained his smile and raised his head to meet His Royal Highness's eyes. "Although I, Chu Lushan, do not have the surname Su, I am still a member of the Su family. In this lifetime, I will be the general's adopted son. I have never heard of a Yang, and I don't even recognize Bailiang or Bailiang." Su Fengyin said angrily, "Chu Lushan, I told you to stop." Chu Lushan clenched his fists and placed them on his knees. He gritted his teeth and said in a low voice, "Your Highness." Chu Lushan had to support himself with one hand to get up. When he bent over, he laughed and said self-deprecatingly, "I, Chu Lushan, am obsessed with cleanliness. Every day, I have to change into a set of luxurious clothes. I like luxury. Every day, I have to change horses. I'm addicted to good food. Every day, I have to have the chef make new dishes." He would change everything except for his master. Chu Lushan wished that he could let all the Bailiang ingrates who were indebted to the Su family know a simple truth. There are 2 kinds of bitterness in life. You can't get what you want, and you can lose what you have. As long as Your Highness allows Chu Lushan to be in power, Chu Lushan will not be able to bear the sight of anyone talking without feeling any pain. After he got up, this talented and shrewd Chu Basha lowered his head. His eyes were red as he said slowly, "Chu Lushan's master is only foster father. Ever since he took the infant boy from foster mother's hands, ever since he smiled at Chu Lushan, he has treated him as his own younger brother." Su Xiao chuckled and said, all right. Lushan, sit down for foster father. Why are you quarreling with your family? But then again, it's good to quarrel. If you speak your mind, there's no threshold that you can't cross." Chu Lushan sat down obediently. Su Fengyin walked out of the house silently and stood alone in the courtyard. Su Xiao said softly, "Lushan, Fengyin is doing this for your own good. He believes in fate and cherishes fortune and fate the most. He's afraid that you will suffer from retribution. My foster father has already lost 3 foster sons. When you die, or Yuan Zuozong dies on the battlefield, he will feel guilty towards me. But who can he find to complain to? All these years, he cherishes the maids in Wutongan very much, but he doesn't dare to care too much about them. He's just worried that one day something will happen to them because of him. Hearing this, Chu Lushan wanted to say something but stopped. Su Xiao waved his hand and said, "It might not have been so in the past, but now he can handle it. There's no other way. He's my Su Xiao's son." Chu Lushan punched his knee hard. Su Xiao said with a smile, "Changsheng, that little girl, is blessed. Foster father likes her when he sees her. Now, while foster father is still clear-headed and can still manage things, let's settle this child marriage first." Chu Lushan was stunned. Then he saw his foster father take out a badly wet jade bracelet from his sleeve. A layman could tell at a glance that it was not worth much. But Chu Lushan, such a wicked man who could make children stop crying, suddenly sobbed. Su Xiao stood up from the chair and squatted in front of Chu Lushan. He said with emotion, "It's reasonable to say that this bracelet is the heirloom of our Su family. Foster father wants to help your foster mother to give it to the future wife of the king of Bailiang. But it's not something that can be done. Foster father thought about it and decided not to give it to his daughter-in-law, but to give it to his granddaughter-in-law is the same. You also know that among the 6 foster sons, your foster mother loves you the most. She said that you are talented, honest, and know how to repay kindness. She also advised you to read more. You also know that your foster mother rarely cries. That time when you helped your foster father carry so many swords, your foster mother saw you being carried back on a horse and cried in front of everyone. She even scolded me, Su Xiao, for being a good-for-nothing and scolded me for not treating you as a son. And that time, when you rode thousands of cavalry to Shu, your foster mother calculated the time and then waited for you on the mountain for a few days. She was always afraid that you wouldn't come back. She even told your foster father that when you have a daughter in the future, you must be even closer. But in the end, you gave birth to a string of sons. Before your foster mother passed away, she was still worried about this matter and said that she would most likely become his granddaughter-in-law." Chu Lushan held the bracelet that his foster father gave to his foster mother as a token of love. He cried like a child. Chapter 9:29. On the first day of a new year, regardless of whether it was the emperor, officials, or commoners, every household had to have some free time. Even the New Year greetings had to start tomorrow. However, 2 carriages had already quietly left Liangzhou and were heading towards Lingzhou. On one carriage, other than Huyan Guanin, who was nominally serving Su Fingyan, there was also a woman who said she wanted to leave the palace for a breather. The 2 women had similar looks. Scholars despised each other, and it was natural for women to be jealous. However, Su Fingyan ran to discuss Lingzhou matters with Su Beiji and did not pay attention to them. Thus, it did not matter if they were harmonious or at odds with each other. According to the agreement, Northern Liangdao's official documents would be sent to Huangnan County on the 6th day of the first month. Other than Governor Song Yin, who was promoted to the title of Little Governor in Lingzhou, Zijin Wang family's Wang Luding would also go to Jinlu County. The 2 family disciples of Lingsu Wang family would also go to Yuliang Prefecture to be the county magistrate and deputy county magistrate respectively. In addition, Commandant Zhao Wui would enter the Lingzhou General's Manor and be promoted to the 3rd in command of Lingzhou's military, Xianxia Commandant. At that time, even an idiot would be able to see that the new Lingzhou general was determined to make the administrator, who was also the Lingzhou governor, into a slow stew. On the 2nd day of the first month, Lingzhou was very lively. Logically speaking, some of the officials and dignitaries who were far away and could visit Sir Li in a few days all rushed over on the same day. The administrator's manor was filled with people and carriages. The housekeeper and gatekeeper of the Li Manor could be considered particularly slick and clever, but they still couldn't handle the social interactions. They all wished they had 3 heads and 6 arms. Ligonda did not rest for a moment in the morning and was busy until dusk. Many of his old friends and confidants could only deal with it by drinking a few mouthfuls of wine. Otherwise, even if Li Gongda had a large amount of energy, he would not be able to handle the waves of guests. Li Hanlin did not return home for the New Year this year. He wrote a letter back home that was clearly written by someone else. He said that he was going to Beimeng to play around. Seeing this, Li Fujian's heart jumped. She wanted nothing more than to grab her brother's ear and drag him home. She put down the letter, picked it up, and put it down again. Li Fujian felt a bit of hidden bitterness. She was indeed as her father had said. She did not understand what men were thinking. Why were they able to enjoy their father's achievements and have a smooth career in the officialdom, but they had to take risks and fight for fame? Li Fujian offered her father a cup of hangover tea when he finally caught his breath. She helped him rub his shoulders and asked softly, "Father, why are there so many people here? Is it because you have become an official and have no choice but to fight to be the first? Are you afraid that if they come late, you will make things difficult for them?" Li Gongda shook his head with a bitter smile. "Didn't you see that the old scholar, Yuan Diqing, came today? With his arrogance, even if your father became the head of the 6 ministries, the minister of personnel, this old man would still be the last to visit. Only then would he be able to show his noble character and unquestionable integrity. The reason why they all came together is because the owner of the house next door is not around. They are afraid that His Royal Highness will return to the Lingzhou General's manor in 2 days. If they show their faces again, it is better to be safe than sorry. What if the new Lingzhou General coincidentally bumps into them? Wouldn't they be looking for trouble? Your father making things difficult for them is just to suppress their rise in their official career. However, the neighbor can directly make them lose their official status." Li Fujian said mockingly. "He is indeed capable of doing such a rude and unreasonable thing." Li Gongda smiled and said, "Wrong, very wrong. Jin, father knows that you have never taken father's word seriously. Since father has allowed Guo Fufeng into the family this time because of you, then you should seriously listen to father's heartfelt words this time. How about it?" Li Fujian made a sound of acknowledgement. Li Gongda drank a mouthful of tea and let out a breath. Only then did he say leisurely, "As the Bailiang Taoist administrator, you are the head of the civil officials. According to the law, the Lingzhou provincial governor should be someone else. However, why do you insist on having this position as well? Father's desire to be an official is not false, but His Highness the Heir Apparent has come to be the general of Lingzhou next door to our family. Logically speaking, no matter how thick-skinned father is, it would be wise to take the latter and step down. However, father is truly worried. Nearly 1,000 scholars have entered northern Liang, and most of them are from Lingzhou. In the future, northern Liang's civil and military officials will be separated, and the 2 sides will be clearly separated. This is the general trend. If father doesn't have the position of Lingzhou's provincial governor, then his words will still be effective, but it will definitely be greatly reduced. Father's talent and learning are shallow, and he doesn't have an advantage like Wang Shihua's. If we miss this great opportunity to cultivate trusted aides, when Su Beiji or someone else replaces father's position as the administrator in the future, the Li family might very quickly be ridden on top of our heads. We don't need to be afraid of a falling tree, but we need to be afraid of a falling wall being pushed by everyone. Your younger brother is ruthless. Father does not doubt that he can become a colonel or even a general. However, he is my only son. He cannot lick the blood of blades on the border for the rest of his life. When he returns to the local areas, when the time comes, it will be an unfamiliar official field where civil officials are in charge. The Hanlin Academy is a martial man who is used to killing and might not be able to make a detour. Thus, I want to quickly pave the way and build a bridge for the Hanlin Academy while my words still carry weight. In the future, no matter if it is mountains or rivers, the Hanlin Academy will be able to walk smoothly. However, at this time, without the Lingzhou provincial governor, do you think those unscrupulous and snobbish people will not be worried? Thus, even if the great general personally came to the manor and personally supported His Royal Highness, he still forced himself to eat the bear's heart and leopard's guts. He wanted to be the provincial governor for 1 or 2 more years. In any case, he had to get familiar with those scholars before he was able to vacate this position. As for His Highness, unexpectedly, he was able to endure it. Actually, if he really wanted to shed all pretense of cordiality and directly ask your father for the Lingzhou provincial governor position, your father would not dare to not hand it over. Either he purposely smiled mischievously and told your father that he was not satisfied with being the Lingzhou general and wanted to be the provincial governor, and your father would have to hand it over with both hands. However, he did not do anything. In the beginning, your father thought that he had finally passed this hurdle, but your father thought too simply. When you told your father that he had appeared in Song Yan's house and the two of them were chatting happily, your father knew that something bad had happened. Speaking of it, your father and Yin Jieshi had always been fighting both openly and secretly, each placing their own bets. Yin Jieshi was unlucky and placed his bet on Chun Jibao, while your father had exceptional insight and placed his bet on His Royal Highness. When Yin Jieshi saw that the situation was not right, he immediately packed up and left. However, this fellow was lucky and managed to escape from Baiyang. Otherwise, even if your father knelt for 3 days and 3 nights to plead for him, it would still be useless. At that time, your father told him that His Royal Highness was not so useless. In private, your father always liked to criticize Yin Jieshi's lack of insight. As a result, your father only knew that he was just a pot calling the kettle black. His Royal Highness went to Huangnam County this time and abducted 3 family heads in Huangnam County, plus Song Yin, who is estimated to be the provincial governor of Lingzhou soon. Zhener, you always felt that Hanlin went to the border to join the army, and it was His Royal Highness who harmed him. However, have you ever thought about why Hanlin, such a stubborn ghoul, suddenly changed into another person? The reason is actually not complicated. You also know it in your heart, but you just don't want to admit it. You told your mother that your younger brother felt that Hanlin had lost face when he went to Yinshi Bazaar in the capital, and that kid from the Kong family became officials and had a bright future ahead of him. So he gritted his teeth and worked hard. You really don't know that in the past, Hanlin couldn't wait for the 3 brothers to become undisciplined and out of control, so that he would be the only one to freeload. Then, he would be able to eat and drink freely and live a carefree life in a muddle-headed way. For him at that time, when his brother became successful, he was prouder than himself. Why did he go to the border? Why did he become a crossbowman? There was no other reason. It was because Hanlin knew that among the 3 brothers, His Royal Highness, who he admired the most, could already be independent. Hanlin only began to realize at that time. In addition, he had always been learning from His Royal Highness. When His Royal Highness was messing around, he messed around. Since His Royal Highness stopped messing around, he naturally felt bored. Therefore, he became the Li Hanlin that his father and sister did not know. Zhener, do you dare to say that the Li Hanlin today does not make you feel gratified? Do you not feel honored? So, what do you have to complain about His Royal Highness? In the end, it's because for so many years, your heart. Li Fuzhen said plainly, "Father, the tea is cold. I will help you change a cup." Chapter 9:30. Li Gongda passed the teacup over and sighed softly. Forcefully picked melons are not sweet. Then what about the melons you pick yourself? Li Gongda collected his thoughts and muttered to himself, "Forget it. Since things have come to this, it's good to not be the provincial governor of Lingzhou. If I give it up quickly, the Su family will remember this favor. It's time to return Lingzhou to a stable officialdom." When Li Gongda turned his head around, he said, "Master, there is a fellow who claims to be Master's junior and wants to see Master no matter what. He gave me 20 taels of gold right away, scaring me. If it was a normal day, this gold would have been earned by Master. But today, it is not his turn to bother Master. A scholar with no scholarly achievements, no family background, and only some money is worthy of showing off in our Li household. He really doesn't know what's good for him. Today, even a 6th-ranked official can't say more than a few words. Even a rank 6 official can't say anything." Li Gongda waved his hand, and He Chong turned to leave. He then exclaimed and said, "That's right, Master, that 30-something-year-old junior said his name is Su Hun, and he is from Lingzhou's Danyang County. He even said shamelessly that as long as he said this, Master will definitely meet him. Ligonda was absent-mindedly drinking tea with his head lowered. His fingers trembled. Just as the old steward Yichang was about to drive the young man who did not know the immensity of heaven and earth out of the mansion, the administrator raised his head and calmly said, "Bring him here." The old manager acknowledged and did not dare to say anything. He turned around and heard Ligonda ask softly, "Is the Lingzhou general's residence still empty?" Yichang nodded. "It's empty. The Lingzhou general has not returned yet." Ligonda nodded and waited for the loyal old manager to leave before placing the teacup on the table. He stood up and joked with Li Fuzhen. "Father still needs to entertain guests. Didn't you always complain that I looked down on that poor scholar Guo Fufeng? Bring him to see your mother. A grown girl cannot be kept at home. Father will turn a blind eye and treat it as me forcing you out of the house." In the past, Li Fuzhen would have been overjoyed. However, at this moment, based on his intuition, he asked softly, "Father, is this Danyang County guest called Suhun?" Ligonda smiled indifferently and said, "An old friend's disciple. I have to meet him." Li Fuzhen was skeptical and left the house with a worried heart. The old steward quickly brought in Suhun, who did not look like a noble at all. The administrator, who had already sat back in his chair, squinted his eyes and looked at him carefully. He hesitated for a moment, held the cup lid with 2 fingers, and shook the slightly cold tea. The old steward left tactfully. Suhun, who looked ordinary, stepped into the house and closed the door without asking for permission. He smiled and said, "Suhun thanks the late uncle." Ligonda did not speak from the beginning to the end. He lowered his head and drank his tea. This Suhun was very unfamiliar to the entire Lingzhou. Probably not many people could recognize him. Even if they had met him once, they would not remember him. However, Ligonda was different from ordinary people. When the Golden Weaving Bureau was established in Bailiang, it was located in Danyang County. According to the original intention of the imperial court, the Golden Weaving Bureau should have reported to the imperial study in the capital. He should have reported everything to the military officials in Bailiang, as well as the scholars' recommendations and customs. However, Li Shifeng was probably living under someone else's roof and knew that Su Xiao was not to be trifled with. He had been doing nothing and turned the Weaving Bureau, which had a gloomy authority, into a government office with few visitors. He only symbolically paid a visit to Ligonda and Yinjieshi during festivals. Li Shifeng often traveled around Bailiang and did not deliberately hide anything. There was once when he met Ligonda, who was the governor of Feng province at that time. At that time, Li Shifeng let a coachman appear for no reason and introduced him as a distant relative of his called Suhun. Ligonda was silent for a long time. He finally raised his head and looked at Suhun. Suhun handed something to the administrator. "This is the handwriting of the Grand Secretary Zhang Julu." Huan, one of the province, also wrote a note. Suhun saw that Ligonda had no intention of taking it. He smiled and carefully placed it on the table. He said calmly, "If you don't trust the secret letter, don't worry. You can find a way to verify the handwriting and seal in private. If you don't trust Li Shifeng, you can take Suhun and send him to the Lingzhou general's mansion next door. If you don't trust Suhun, you can send him to the Golden Weaving Bureau and then send him to Chulushan. If you don't trust the imperial court, you can take a look at the secret letter before making a decision." Ligonda responded with a cold smile. Suhun took it calmly. After a while, Ligonda glanced at the table and asked calmly, "Why are there 2 secret letters? What's written in them?" Suhun smiled. "Suhun is just a messenger. Even if I die, I won't know what's written in the letter." Li Shifeng didn't touch the secret letter from the beginning to the end. As for why there are 2 secret letters, since you asked about it, it means that they are sincere. Then Suhun has to die. Ligonda frowned. "What do you mean?" Suhun said calmly, "Suhun has avoided all the spies in Lingzhou. Please don't worry about this. I might as well tell you the truth. The Lu family in Qingzhou was attacked. Bailiang's peregrine falcon suffered heavy casualties. Xiaogo suffered even more. The main reason was not to stop the Lu family from dying. It was to attract Lingzhou's attention so that Suhun's trip would be foolproof. But this is not enough. The imperial court wants me to tell you why there are two secret letters after you have the intention to accept the secret letter. One letter is real, the other is fake. Vermilion mud seal is real if the color is too heavy and fake if the color is too light. The fake letter was sent by the administrator to the Crown Prince of Baelyang. Of course, other than one secret letter, it is not enough to clear your suspicion. So Su-Han has to die. Golden Weaver Li Shifeng also has to die. Even the entire Golden Weaver Bureau will cease to exist from today onwards. But Li Shifeng has suffered. A Golden Weaver Bureau allows the Imperial Court to have one more pillar of the Imperial Court. At the same time, Baelyang has one less administrator. It is worth it. Su-Han spat out a poisonous pill from his mouth. After peeling it, a small piece of paper was revealed. He crushed the pill and hid it in his sleeve. After reading the contents of the paper, he stuffed the paper into his mouth and swallowed it. He said expressionlessly, "The day after tomorrow." Ligonda did not speak. Su-Han explained, "The Crown Prince of Baelyang will arrive in Lingzhou the day after tomorrow. Today, Su-Han will leave quietly and come back the day after tomorrow. The administrator will kidnap Su-Han and send him to the general's mansion in Lingzhou. After Su-Han's death, there will be a group of death warriors and a group of elite Zhaogo left Baelyang with the administrator. But they can only bring 18 people at most. In order to leave smoothly, Sir Li will have to cooperate with us. He will first give up his position as the provincial governor of Lingzhou and stay in Lingzhou for at least half a year. During this time, he will go out to relax the surveillance of the Baelyang spies. As for when the Zhaogo will make a move, someone will inform Sir Li." Ligonda sneered, "The Imperial Court seems to have forgotten about my son, Li Hanlin." Su-Han smiled. "Young Master Li has received a military order to go to the south to carry out a secret mission. He will first stay in Gusai Prefecture. Then, he will go east along the northern border of Yuliang and enter Ji Prefecture. Finally, he will meet Sir Li in the capital." Ligonda closed his eyes and tapped the teacup lid lightly. He said with slight self-mockery, "Last time, Xianxia only brought 16 people out. The Imperial Court is really concerned about me." Su-Han was silent. Ligonda smiled and said, "Let me do the math. I, Ligonda, am now a rank 2 border official. If I want to advance any further, I can forget about Northern Liang. However, there aren't many positions in the capital. Among the 6 ministers, other than the Minister of Personnel, who was recently promoted, the rest are nothing. The fake secret letter must have said that the Minister of Personnel is too full. Who knows? It might be even more petty, like the Minister of Revenue or the Minister of Justice. However, I am very curious as to what kind of reward was written in the letter before I opened it. Zhang Julu is in charge of the Minister's Department and cannot be changed. Huan Wenkai is promoted to the Minister's Department and cannot be changed either. That leaves only the Hall of Secretaries. Other than becoming the lord of this place, it seems that I will also be given the title of Grand Secretary of the Imperial Cabinet. Ligonda has been addicted to being an official all his life, but I never thought that I would be able to be on par with Sun Shiji and the others." Su-Han remained silent when he should not have spoken. Ligonda smiled and asked, "Are you not afraid that I will send you and the letter to His Royal Highness now?" Su-Han said indifferently, "I will die anyway. So what if I die 2 days earlier?" Ligonda stared at his face for a moment and nodded. "Thank you, Sir Li, for letting me die a worthy death." Su-Han bowed deeply and gently opened the door. Then, he quietly left the administrator's mansion. Ligonda stood up and walked to the side of the table. He stretched out a hand and quickly retracted it as if it was hot. Then, he slowly stretched out his hand again. However, his hand stopped a few inches above the 2 secret letters. His expression was gloomy. Chapter 9:31. On the 2nd day of the 1st lunar month, at the border between Liang and Ling provinces, at the intersection of 2 post-house roads, a group of carriages with escort flags mounted on them turned into the spacious north-south post-house road, following behind the 2 carriages. Escorting an escort was dangerous and unpredictable. As long as there was a relatively safe official road, One would have to ride at full speed to make up for the time spent on careful escorting on mountain roads and rivers. This group of carriages carrying the banner of the Golden Gate Escort Agency was quite ostentatious. There were more than 30 burly men, most of whom were young and strong. When the escort team passed by the two carriages in front of them, one of the carriages suddenly lifted the curtain. A gray-haired head poked out and smiled at one of the escorts. "Hero, do you still remember me? Last time, when we were entering autumn, we drank green ant wine together at the roadside wine shop." After the escort recovered from his shock, he slowed down his horse and approached the carriage. His face full of joy, he nodded and said loudly, "I remember. How could I not? Young master's handwriting is good, and your father is also very loyal. He treated us brothers to 2 large jars of green ant wine and 5 caddies of beef. Why, are you also heading to Ling Province?" Su Fengyan smiled and said, "Isn't that so? Now that I'm making a living in the capital of Ling Province, I have to run over there after spending the new year at home. It's a life of hard work. If I remember correctly, there's a shop a few li ahead. The wine and meat are authentic and the price is fair. If it's on the way and won't affect your escort work, let's eat together. It'll be more lively. It's still my treat." The escort who came from Liaodong to Bailiang to make a living was immediately put in a difficult position. Back then, the 3 of them were forced into a corner by that mad dog with the surname Yuan. Out of more than 100 people in the sect, only the 3 of them were left. That mad dog also had an old father-in-law who was said to be extremely powerful in the Liang imperial court. After thinking about it, they felt that only Bailiang could not control them. But now, even though they relied on their martial arts skills and finally had a stable job, they were still living under someone else's roof. He was just a new escort and had a look at the old escort's face. For a moment, he was in a dilemma. Fortunately, the old escort, who was rather dignified in the Golden Gate Escort Agency, had sharp eyes. After carefully sizing up the 2 carriages for a moment, he laughed loudly and said, "Since this young master is an old acquaintance of our brother Do, then he can be considered a friend of our Golden Gate Escort Agency. I know the shop in front. It's the next stop for our escort agency. Later on, we won't dare to let young master spend money. We'll pay for the wine. No matter how poor the Golden Gate Escort Agency is, we still have to pay for it." Su Fengyan did not refuse. Without him saying anything, the coachman, Su Yanbing, had already whipped the horse to move faster. This detail made the old escort inwardly click his tongue in wonder. He did not expect that not only did this young master, who should be from extraordinary family, look so friendly, but even his retainer was a sensible person. The 2 groups of people arrived at the familiar shop that was very clean for the escort agency. The shopkeeper had long been familiar with the eating habits of these returning customers, so he did not need to say much. He instructed the shop's staff to quickly serve the dishes and wine. There was more meat than rice than wine. It was an ironclad rule that escorts were not allowed to drink alcohol. Usually, only 1 or 2 highly respected veterans in the escort agency who were fond of wine were allowed to have a few sips. Su Yanbing and Hong Shuwen were straightforward and did not sit at the table. Hu Yingguanin was also not hungry. In addition, the woman in the same carriage had alighted, so she was even more reluctant to leave the warm carriage. Thus, the main table with wine was occupied by Su Fengyan, Su Beiji, and Pei Nanwei. She sat side by side with Su Fengyan. There was also the old escort leader, Bao Fengshou, as well as Do Liang, a native of Liaodong, who should not have been qualified to sit at this table. Pei Nanwei was draped in an expensive white fox fur coat and a fox fur hat. Originally, such attire would have made a woman with slightly darker skin appear as black as charcoal. However, her attire made her look even more beautiful than snow. The old escort leader, who had traveled extensively for most of his life, still had to expend a lot of effort to retract his gaze. He thought to himself, "I've never seen such a beautiful woman in my life. This meal was well worth it." The young waiter in charge of serving the dishes and wine almost knocked the wine jar to the ground. His face flushed red, and he resentfully looked back 3 times with every step. He was kicked by the angry shopkeeper until he cried out in pain. As usual, Su Fengyin referred to himself as Su Qi to outsiders. After a brief conversation with Dou Liang and Bao Fengshou, he roughly knew about Dou Liang's situation and the scale of the Golden Gate escort agency. Dou Liang's personality was straightforward, but he was thin-skinned. He did not exchange pleasantries with this young Master Su. When Bao Fengshou met him for the first time, he was very familiar with building up their relationship. He kept saying that when they arrived at the Golden Gate escort agency in Lingzhou's capital, he had to personally pay a New Year's visit to young Master Su's residence. Especially when he heard that Su Qi's family lived on Apricot Street. This experienced Jiang Human's eyes burned with passion. One had to know that Apricot Street was where the administrator and a large number of Lingzhou's influential officials lived. Recently, there was even a Lingzhou general with the surname Su. Although Apricot Street was very long, and there were people who were not officials, since they could live on that street. Even if they did not have any power, they were still the wealthiest people in Lingzhou. In the industry, the Golden Gate escort agency had always been using sparrow darts, which were small darts with little meat and no oil. The big escort agencies all used sow darts, which earned them so much money that their hands went limp. If they could establish connections with the nobles on Apricot Street and spread word of mouth, the Golden Gate escort agency would make a name for themselves. They would be considered to have truly developed. Otherwise, who would be willing to spend New Year's on the escort route? Su Fengyin took the initiative to propose a toast 5 or 6 times, but most of the time, he clinked bowls with Dou Liang. This made Dou Liang, a homeless dog, feel an indescribable warmth. However, he was not good with words, so he did not care if he would be stung by the head of the escort after the event. He did not leave a single drop of wine behind. After eating and drinking to their heart's content, Su Fengyin smiled and said, "My ancestors are also from Liaodong in Jianzhou. Brother Dou and I can be considered acquaintances in a foreign land. How rare." When we return to Lingzhou City, Su Qi will definitely go to the Golden Gate escort agency to pay New Year's greetings. As for the other 2 brothers, I will have to properly meet them. I did not drink to my heart's content today, so let's leave it for now. When the time comes, we will not return until we are drunk. Bao Fengshou chuckled and said, "Young Master Su will also have to pay a visit. The Golden Gate escort agency must not be impolite. If this gets out, we will be laughed at." How could Su Fengyin not know what the old escort was thinking? He was afraid that Su Qi was a small family that bragged without a draft, so he had to personally take a look at the mansion to be at ease. He did not expose him and nodded with a smile. "No problem. In the future, if there are any items that need to be escorted, since Brother Dou is in your escort agency, I will specially trouble the Golden Gate escort agency." The escort agency still had to hurry on with their journey. Both parties cupped their fists and bade farewell. Bao Fengshou whispered to the shopkeeper when he paid the bill and gave him a few extra pieces of silver. Obviously, he knew that young Master Su wanted more food and wine, so the escort agency paid for it in advance. Su Fengyin sat back down on the bench and asked for an extra pot of warm green ant wine. He poured half a bowl for Su Beiji and Pei Nanwei. Su Beiji laughed softly and said, "After this escort mission, Dou Yang's salary will definitely double." Su Fengyin did not comment and changed the topic, saying Xianxia not only has to manage the salt and iron industry, but also has full authority over the transport of grain. One is competing with the local tyrants, the other is wrangling with the officials of the capital. He has already provoked the local tyrants. Do you think he can do it? Su Beiji said indifferently, "I don't know." Su Fengyin pursed his lips and continued to ask, "You are already the provincial governor of Lingzhou. Xianxia still does not have a real official position. Do you think he has a knot in his heart?" Su Beiji only drank. Su Fengyin clicked his tongue and said, "I originally thought that the 2 of you are so smart that you don't have to belittle each other. I didn't expect that you still can't escape from this vicious circle." Su Beiji squinted his eyes and said, "What do you know?" Su Fengyin said shamelessly, "Be careful. I will really let out a fart for you." Su Beiji wiped the wine stain on the corner of his mouth. "When I become the provincial governor, you should get out of Lingzhou as soon as possible. Out of sight, out of mind." Su Fengyin only cared about cursing and swearing, but there was nothing he could do. Peinan Wei was a little puzzled. There was still someone in this world who could subdue another. Was it the heir of Bailiang beside her? On the third day of the first lunar month, the Lingzhou general did not enter the Lingzhou prefecture city. This made many of the old foxes in the official circles who had a keen sense of smell to act were greatly disappointed. They all retreated from the general's manor on Xianxia Street and endured the cold for a day for nothing. They resisted the urge to jump up and down and curse. They begged in their hearts that His Royal Highness must return to the city tomorrow. Otherwise, when would this suffering end? Chapter 9:32. In the dusk of the fourth day of the first month, most of the visitors to Apricot Street had left. Only a few officials and nobles who lived on the street remained. When they saw the two carriages slowly approach, they almost burst into tears. Old ancestor, you are finally willing to come. Regardless of whether they were old or in the prime of their lives, they all quickly rushed toward the carriages and inquired about the well-being of the young people who slowly got off the carriage. Everyone's flattery, other than the same title, His Royal Highness, did not repeat a single word. If the inexperienced officials had the chance to stand to the side and listen, they would definitely benefit greatly. They suddenly realized that flattery could be done to the point of perfection. Some of the old masters, who used to be arrogant, were now as respectful and reverent as they were when they saw the ancestors in the paintings during the ancestral worship ceremony. Su Fengyin greeted them one by one with a smile. Even if he did not report his official position, he was still able to say it word for word. While these important people in Lingzhou with a large age difference were putting honey on their lips, they could not help but have mixed feelings in their hearts. Just based on this point, even if His Highness was not smart, he was not stupid at all. Su Fengyin stopped and had one of the Lingzhou fifth-ranking officials go to the administrator's manor to inform him that he would go visit Uncle Li the next day. The old man, who was so old that he would always return home to recuperate every time he encountered a difficult situation, was so strong that it made his colleagues speechless. Su Fengyin brought everyone into the general's official residence. Then, he had Su Beiji, who was not of high rank, accompany him in the study to catch up with the loyal officials of Lingzhou one by one. Then, those at the back saw the people in front of them all leave with stiff faces without exception. However, there was unconcealable joy between their brows. They slowly walked to the corner of the corridor and immediately moved like the wind. They were most likely going home to report the good news. Most of the guests entered the manor nervously and went out in high spirits to return home. Su Beiji, who His Royal Highness had placed on the table to support him, did not have any joy on his face. He stood at the window and looked at the administrator's manor with a serious expression. Su Fengyin sat behind the desk with one hand supporting his cheek and the other rolling the copper coin between his fingers. Su Beiji said, "Relax." Su Fengyin thought for a while. "All right, accompany me to the Golden Gate Escort Agency to drink. Since the wine in Lingzhou doesn't have any worldly and bloody smell, do you want to drink more?" Su Beiji, who had only gotten drunk once in Beimeng, nodded. Su Fengyin and Su Beiji got into the carriage. Su Yanbing drove the carriage to the Golden Gate Escort Agency on the other side of the city. Earlier, when they crossed the threshold of the side door, Su Fengyin paused for a moment and raised his head to glance at the gray sky. After a while, he could no longer see the peak of the mountain that only appeared when the weather was clear. When they arrived at the entrance of the Golden Gate Escort Agency, Su Fengyin introduced himself as Su Qi from Apricot Street and said that he knew the old escort leader Bao Fengshou and the new escort leader Dou Liang. The eyes of the young man guarding the door lit up. Hearing the words Apricot Street was enough. It was even more useful than mentioning Bao Fengshou. His impatience was swept away, and he subconsciously bowed. However, when he saw the warm and smiling face of the young master, he immediately straightened his back. Who knew if this fellow was bragging? Of the young masters who lived on that street, how many of them had not trampled and injured people in Lingzhou before? How could they be smiling so happily with a small guard like him? Who would believe that? Bao Fengshou, who lived in the escort agency, hurried over. He was extremely friendly and polite. Not only him, Even the first and second masters of the escort agency were alerted. Su Qi was also tactful and directly revealed the identity of the young master beside him. He had served as a soldier in Longqing County and was currently doing some miscellaneous work for Governor Zhong Qingxin. However, he was about to be promoted to the provincial government office in small steps. As a result, not only were the two masters happy, they were also somewhat in awe. Who in Lingzhou didn't know about Huaihua great General Zhong Hongwu and his eldest son, Zhong Qingxin? Although it was rumored that His Royal Highness had extinguished some of his arrogance, a starving camel was still bigger than a horse. The Zhong family was undoubtedly still a first-class family in Beiliang that ordinary people felt was unreachable. To be able to get along with Governor Zhong day and night, how could the Golden Gate Escort Agency, which was as small as a sesame seed, be neglected? Dou Liang and his two brothers hadn't moved into the escort agency for the time being. Instead, they rented a small, remote, and simple residence outside. The escort agency hurriedly sent someone to invite them over to drink. The first master personally set up a large charcoal brazier. After the group of people sat down, they drank to their heart's content. When they were drunk, the two masters were emotional people and were not as restrained as before. They chatted and laughed without restraint. Because Dou Liang's two brothers, Wei, Tang, and Fan Yuyang, had met before, they had a good impression of them at that time. In addition, their eldest brother, Dou Liang, had come back from his escort mission to pave the way. They had already said a lot of good things about Su Qi, so they were even more open when they drank. The first master, Xianxia, had a slightly scholarly name. It was probably because his parents had hoped that he would be able to pass the imperial examinations in the future. However, it was very rough, and there was a shocking scar on his face. When he talked about this old story with Su Fengyan and Su Beiji, he didn't have any complaints. It was just that more than 10 years ago, he had been slashed in the middle of the street by a man who had kidnapped a woman. He didn't dare to fight back. In terms of martial arts, he could beat that son of a bitch 10 times with one hand. However, in terms of backing, he used Xianxia, lost by 1,000,000 miles and admitted defeat. To this day, this old man could only laugh and curse. Su Fengyan smiled and turned his head to Su Beiji and said, "In the future, I'll have to rely on you to be impartial and be the bad guy in this kind of situation." Su Beiji was indifferent and only drank in big mouthfuls. The men of the Golden Gate Escort Agency didn't take it too seriously. Even if the two young masters with the surname Su had a good status, Lingzhou City was deeply intertwined. Even the Lingzhou general couldn't do anything and was fooled by everyone. They all said that the administrator wanted to give His Royal Highness a show of strength. Therefore, as long as it was an outsider, no matter who it was, even if it was a young official from a landowning household, they couldn't casually make trouble here. Su Fengyan raised his bowl. It was probably the 7th or 8th bowl, but he still drank it all in one gulp. The people of the escort agency couldn't help but cheer from the bottom of their hearts. This alcohol tolerance and alcohol tolerance were both excellent. Su Fengyan casually wiped his mouth and said with a smile, "Before I get drunk, I'll quickly say a few words of seriousness. Old Brother Dou, Old Brother Wei, and Old Brother Fan are all Su Qi's friends. In the future, I'll have to ask the two masters and old escort leader Bao to take care of me. Su Qi's bowl of wine is my thanks." The second master, Zhang He, was tongue-tied. He raised his big white bowl and said loudly, "Young Master Su is straightforward. Our escort agency is small, but no one is a bashful woman." Zhang He also poured out his heart to young Master Su. It's not that Dou Liang's three brothers don't have any ability, but they are too great. Zhang He has seen it all. Take Wei Tang and Fan Yuyang, for example. In fact, not to mention becoming an escort like Dou Liang, even becoming an escort leader is a matter of course. But in our small place, the rules are the same as other places. It's just that there's no way around it. Everyone has to endure it bit by bit, from a daughter-in-law to a mother-in-law. Otherwise, other people won't be convinced and will have resentment in their hearts. Zhang He, don't dare to say anything like I'll let my three brothers become escort leaders tomorrow. I can only apologize to Dou Liang's three brothers. First master, shall we all drink this bowl of wine in our hands? Xianxia raised his bowl and laughed. Everyone is a good man. Let's drink and leave. Cheers. In the end, Su Beiji was also a drunken mess. He was already leaning on Su Fengyan's shoulder. The rough men of the Golden Gate escort agency were all over the place. Xianxia hugged the wine jug and mumbled in his drunken stupor. He was vaguely talking about how he hadn't been able to kill a few northern barbarians in his life. The number one steward of the general's estate, Sun Falu, appeared at the door, sweating profusely. Before he left, His Royal Highness had told him to come to this small escort agency. Su Fengyan, the only one still sober, had no choice but to carry the unconscious Su Beiji on his back and bid farewell to the escorts who were cleaning up the mess with a smile. After walking out of the door, Sun Falu said in a low voice, "Young master, for some reason, the administrator kidnapped a man and brought him to the estate in the middle of the night. What kind of trouble is this?" Su Fengyan made a sound of acknowledgement. The extremely drunk Su Beiji was blindly tossing and turning. He slapped His Royal Highness's head with one hand and casually smeared His Royal Highness's face with the other. Sun Falu was so shocked by this scene that the corner of his mouth twitched. This Su Beiji, who had wandered from Beimang to Arbaliang, if he couldn't become the administrator of Baliang in the future, he, Sun Falu, would directly change his name to Sun Tzu. Su Fengyan slowly walked toward the carriage with Su Juzi on his back. It was difficult to walk. Chapter 9:33. Ligonda was placed in the corridor outside the study by Sun Falu. Suhan was tied up and heavily injured. His clothes were stained with blood. Beside him was one of Ligonda's trusted retainers who stared at Suhan. This person was a true master, and his cultivation was naturally not bad. He was as famous as the Liantong gang leader in the Lingzhou Jianghu. However, one enjoyed wealth in the administrator's manner, while the other had his entire family wiped out in one night. One could see that being a guard dog was much more comfortable than being a stray dog with no one to rely on. Ligonda looked calm. He closed his eyes and focused. His two fists in his sleeves loosened and clenched. At the end of the corridor was Hong Shuwen, who was from the White Horse Righteous faction. He was like a poisonous snake waiting for an opportunity to strike. When Hong Shuwen stood up, Ligonda suddenly opened his eyes. When he saw His Royal Highness carrying Su Beiji back, the scene was too different from what he had imagined. He was stunned. Ligonda was someone who had been through a lot in the officialdom. He immediately calmed himself down and let his retainer leave first. This time, the old man didn't act like an elder. He solemnly shook his sleeves and knelt on the ground. He said in a deep voice, "Ligonda came to apologize to His Royal Highness. I hope Your Highness can save Li Hanlin on account of our 20 years of friendship." Ligonda couldn't see Su Fengyan's expression. His Royal Highness probably handed the drunk Su Beiji to Hong Shuwen and then quickly walked over. He held the administrator's arms and tried to help him up. However, Ligonda tried his best to kneel down. He heard His Royal Highness ask anxiously, "Uncle Li, why are you doing this? How can Fengyan bear the responsibility? So what if he is Hanlin? Uncle Li, get up and talk." Ligonda said with a faint sobbing tone, "Your Highness, if you don't agree to save my son, Hanlin, even if Ligonda dies kneeling here, I will not get up." Su Fengyan, who reeked of alcohol, said angrily, "I don't have to save anyone but Hanlin. How can I let Hanlin fall into danger? Uncle Li, why do you have to be so pretentious? Could it be that as the dignified Taoist administrator of Baliang, you have done something to betray the Su family?" Ligonda raised his head and said with tears running down his face, "Your Highness, Ligonda has been loyal to Baliang for 20 years. Heaven can be my witness. The general's cultivation of the Li family is as good as giving us a new lease on life. Ligonda admits that he can't deny the crime of corruption. He is absolutely loyal to Baliang and the Su family." Su Fengyan squatted in front of the administrator, who had lost his composure, and said softly, "In this case, Uncle Li should get up and talk. First, tell me who the kidnapped person is and why Hanlin wants me to save him. There are no outsiders here. You, and I can speak frankly. If I can't do something, then I will beg Su Xiao. I don't believe that anyone in Bailiang can hurt Hanlin. Who can wrong the Li family? Only then did Li Gongda stand up shakily, wiping away his tears with his sleeve. He pointed at Su Han and said sternly, "This person's surname is Su, and his given name is Su Han. He is the trusted aide of that gold weaver Li Shifeng, and is also a secret agent of the Liang Imperial Court. A few years ago, he took his family out for a spring walk. Li Shifeng, that sly old fox, actually pretended to meet me and purposely mentioned that this person was a descendant of his distant relative. Tonight, this Su Han actually snuck into the mansion and delivered a secret letter personally written by that green-eyed man, saying that as long as I, Li Gongda, am willing to betray Northern Liang, my position in the imperial court would only be higher than that old bastard Xianxia. Furthermore, Zhao Guo had already arranged for the Li family's escape route, so how could Li Gongda be so ungrateful? I immediately apprehended this thief, but my poor son Hamlin has already been transferred to the Northern Mang Southern Dynasty by a military order and is now being forcefully escorted eastwards along the northern border. I'm afraid that it won't be long before he enters the capital from Ji Province. Your Highness, although Li Gongda has no intention of betraying Northern Liang, since he was targeted by Li Shifeng and Su Han, these treacherous villains, it must be because Li Gongda, as the administrator, is not a proper one. No matter how your Highness and the great general deal with Li Gongda will not complain at all. However, your Highness knows Hanlin's character very well. Su Fengyan let out a sigh as he replied with a smile. Oh, I see. Uncle Li, don't worry too much. Come on, have a cup of tea in the study. Fengyan will send a message to Su Xiao, Chu Lushan, and Huang Fucheng, the general of Yuzhou Province. I promise to return a safe and soundly Hamlin to Uncle Li. Li Gongda was about to nod and express his gratitude when he suddenly widened his eyes. His Royal Highness, who had always been smiling in front of him, directly pushed Su Han, a gold nugget who might be able to dig out a lot of secrets from him. His 5 fingers formed a hook and directly tore off half of Su Han's face. Then, as if he still found it too troublesome, he used the Immortal's touch on the head. Poor Su Han died on the spot without saying a word. Su Fengyan, whose hands were covered in blood, casually wiped them on his sleeves. Then, he carefully supported the administrator with one hand and pushed the door open with the other. The two of them stepped over the threshold together. Su Fengyan stopped and leaned back. He smiled at Su Yanbing and said, Uncle Su, please ask Hong Shuwen to quickly send out 3 secret letters. The last one is to be sent to Huang Fucheng. Tell him that I allow him to privately mobilize 2,000 light cavalry to intercept me. By the way, ask someone to send a pot of hot tea. Su Yanbing nodded. Li Gongda said in a low voice, Your Highness, Su Han is clearly not an ordinary spy. Li Gongda tried to get information from him before. It seems that when Yin Jieshi escaped from Bailiang, he was also personally involved. With him in our hands, we don't have to worry about Li Shifeng and the Golden Weaving Bureau not giving in. It seems safer to kill him later. Su Fengyan shook his head and said with a smile, Uncle Li, you underestimate how tight-lipped these men of sacrifice are. Besides, I don't care about Li Shifeng or the Weaving Bureau in my own territory of Bailiang. Even if there are spies from Zhao Guo, as long as there is a reasonable reason, I can kill them as I want. I'm not their relative. Anyway, it's a life and death battle between 2 sides, so there's no need to care about family ties. When doing this kind of thing, it depends on who's ruthless. The Peregrine Falcon Eagle Guard fell into Zhao Guo's hands outside of Bailiang and ended up in the same way. Otherwise, why would they be called men of sacrifice? They're not called men of sacrifice for nothing. Li Gongda listened to His Royal Highness' casual and indifferent words. When he sat down, he looked at the young man's unfashionable gray hair and did not say anything. Su Fengyan smiled and comforted him. If Uncle Li thinks that Huang Fucheng and 2,000 elite cavalry are not enough, you could send another 200 crossbowmen and 1,000 cavalry. Li Gongda hurriedly agreed. Okay. Sigh, this foul situation is really making things difficult for your Highness. Su Fengyan waved his hand, and Su Yanbing personally brought tea over. Su Fingyin then told him about the order to increase the number of men and horses to come out of seclusion. Su Fingyin sneered and said, Li Shifeng is really amazing. He's been a coward in Beiliang for more than 10 years. If he wants to do something, he'll do it on a large scale. He's addicted to poaching people from the Su family. He's still not satisfied, even after giving Master Zhao an law. Now, he's not even willing to let Uncle Li go. After tonight, I'll go meet this golden weaving bureau. Chapter 9:34. Li Gongda sighed and looked at Su Fingyin. He said sincerely, Your Highness, with that, although it wasn't Li Gongda's fault, I admit that my reputation has been ruined. I don't have the face or heart to be an official anymore. I hope that Your Highness can allow Li Gongda to return to his hometown and be a farmer in Huangnam County. Actually, when Your Highness came to Lingzhou, Li Gongda already had this thought. In the Great River, each new generation surpasses the previous one. The hearts of the people in Beiliang had already reached the level of scholars. Li Gongda knew that his talent was shallow and his reputation was extremely bad. Not to mention the position of primary second-grade administrator. Even the position of Lingzhou provincial governor was not enough to convince the people. In the beginning, when Your Highness became the general of Lingzhou, Li Gongda wanted to help Your Highness for a year or two before retiring. That would fulfill his wish of being an official for 2 dynasties in Beiliang. It was for the public good, but there were also selfish motives. Who would have thought that the moment Your Highness moved into the general's manor, the Lingzhou officialdom under Li Gongda's eyes would become chaotic? At that time, Li Gongda knew that he was old, his abilities were too small, and his experience was shallow. Rather than being scolded away shamelessly, why don't I ask Your Highness to be merciful and let Li Gongda return to his hometown to live out his remaining years? Su Fingyin lowered his head and blew on the steam from the tea. He smiled but did not say anything. The light in the study was dim. Li Gongda held the teacup with both hands to warm it up. The steam rose, and the expressions of the old and young were blurry. Li Gongda chose his words carefully and slowly said, Your Highness, Li Gongda resigned from his position not because he wanted to avoid arousing suspicion, but because he knew that it was difficult for him to take on such a big responsibility. Being the first administrator of Beiliang was like forcing a duck onto a perch. As for Li Gongda's well-known addiction to being an official, he was almost satisfied. Now that the structure of Beiliang has expanded and the atmosphere is brand new, Li Gongda did not read much and was miles away from scholars like Wang Shihua. However, a few days ago, when he saw fusion replacing old talismans with new peaches, he figured out a principle that he did not understand before. No matter how good the old spring festival couplets were, after a year of exposure to the wind and sun, they were unbearably old. Let's not talk about other things. Just looking at them did not feel festive enough. It was not as pleasing to the eyes as the new couplets. Moreover, Beiliang is currently full of vitality and talent. Your Highness has the intention to reform the Beiliang officialdom. In the end, the study of officialdom is nothing more than the essence of the 3 words moving one's position. Therefore, as long as Li Gongda leaves, it is possible that everyone in the Beiliang officialdom will be promoted by a rank. At the very least, the scholars that Your Highness has chosen can all be moved up a rank. Su Fingyin interrupted. Let's not talk about this first. Uncle Li is still young. It is too early to talk about retiring from his position and living leisurely in the forest. Li Gongda wanted to say something, but stopped. Su Fingyin could not help laughing and said mischievously, I guess that Zhang Jiulu will at least give Uncle Li the title of Minister and Grand Secretary to the Imperial Court. Otherwise, he will be too petty. Li Gongda smiled and said, Li Gongda has not opened the secret letter, so I don't know the contents. Then the administrator placed the secret letter in his bosom on the table. Su Fingyin casually glanced at it and heard Li Gongda laugh heartily for the first time that night. If it were up to Li Gongda, he would look down on a minister with the same rank as the administrator and a grand secretary who can't make money out of thin air. It would be more appropriate to let Tananon give up the position of Huan 1 to Li Gongda. Of course, if the grand secretary is willing to give up the position, Li Gongda won't mind kindly accepting it. If that is the case, Ligonda can go back on his word once. Your Highness, please don't stop Ligonda. Su Fengyin drank a mouthful of tea and laughed out loud. If the son of the Zhao family has such courage, I really won't stop Uncle Li. It would be nice if the news of an official trained by Bailiang became the Grand Secretary of the Imperial Court in the end. In the future, wouldn't countless scholars flood into Bailiang to become officials? Because Bailiang is a prosperous land, I would be happy to see them all work hard in Bailiang for 20 to 30 years and accumulate enough hard work. Then, they would run to the Imperial Court to politely accept them for their retirement. They would comfortably enjoy a high position for a decade or so. After they die, they would all be bestowed posthumous titles by the emperor. How good would that be? The Su family of Bailiang would benefit, and the Zhao family of the Imperial Court would gain fame. Everyone would be happy. Ligonda smiled knowingly. Su Fengyin withdrew his smile and said, Uncle Li, you can continue to be the administrator with peace of mind. As for Hanlin, I promise to send you back to Lingzhou unscathed. Ligonda still wanted to say something, but Su Fengyin closed the cup lid and placed it on the table. His expression was one that did not allow rejection. He said, Uncle Li, then it's settled. We'll talk about everything when Hanlin comes back. Ligonda could only stand up and say goodbye. He silently left the study. Su Fengyin walked him to the door of the study. He sat back in his chair and closed his eyes. If this secret matter spread out, it would be enough to shake the entire court. He had planned the entire situation single-handedly. Su Weisheng and Wu Tongyan were in charge of every detail. The golden silk weaver Li Shifeng had made a deal with Bailiang. His children and grandchildren were kept in the capital as hostages. If he wanted to leave Bailiang alive and not arouse the suspicion of the imperial court, or more accurately, the emperor, he had to come up with a flawless plan. Thus, it was true that Li Shifeng was a loyal and responsible spy. It was also true that Zhang Jiulu wrote the 2 letters that Li Shifeng got from the imperial court. It was also true that Li Hanlin was sent to the southern court of Beimang. True and false, it was tangled and complicated. During this period of time, the interests intertwined. Everyone's actions, big and small, were enough to dazzle one's eyes. Bailiang could not afford to make a single mistake. Liang could afford to lose, but Bailiang could not afford to lose. If they won, the Golden Silk Weaver would go from an organization of the imperial court to Bailiang's private property. Large amounts of spies hiding in Bailiang and around Bailiang would be tracked down. Many of the Liang spies who had infiltrated the military at the border would also be uprooted. In this way, the mud in Bailiang could be cleaned up. When Su Fengyin became the general of Lingzhou, his ambition was not in the military affairs of Lingzhou. Instead, he wanted the Bailiang officialdom to be completely free of worries. Only then could those scholars be at ease and settle down. If Ligonda resisted the temptation, then Su Fengyin had told him before that he would let this Uncle Li enjoy his official life. If he did not, then it would be the worst situation. Even with the Yin family's betrayal first, Su Fengyin still had no plans to destroy the Li family. He would only nominally let Ligonda resign and return home with the excuse that he was unwell and peacefully be a rich man in Huangnam County. Just as the administrator had said tonight, once he retreated, the Bailiang officialdom would do its best to act according to His Royal Highness' wishes. Whatever Su Han did, it was Li Shifeng's wishes, and Li Shifeng's guidance to Su Han was Su Fengyin's intentions. As for crossbowman and marksmanship leader Li Hanlin, he had a large group of Bailiang's most elite Eagle Guard following him. There were also 6 Master Realm retainers from the Wang Manor mixed in. Those Zhaogo Death warriors who were in charge of receiving him outside the pass were destined to die. However, Su Fengyin knew that if this happened, the 4 brothers who grew up together, went to brothels, and took the blame together, none of them would be left. The administrator brought his trusted retainer and slowly walked out of the general's manor. Ligonda turned his head and looked at the slightly eerie official residence in the night. He smiled and asked, "What kind of person do you think His Royal Highness is?" The Master Realm retainer hesitated and said, "An expert." Ligonda laughed and did not force this careful Jianghu expert. He muttered to himself, "Although a great man has to be ruthless, but it doesn't mean that he isn't a hero. The retainer did not dare to say much. Ligondo walked to the door of his own manor and was about to step onto the steps. He suddenly retracted his foot and smiled. Let's take a walk. It's rare for Apricot Street to be so peaceful. Ligondo walked to the empty and lonely street and sighed. Everyone is suffering. It's all about finding joy in the suffering. Others may pity you, but you don't know that you are suffering. That is true ability. I, like the general, am old. No matter what I do now, it is for my descendants. In the study room, Su Fengyan reached out and grabbed the teacup. The white porcelain cup shattered. Half of the tea splashed all over him. They were set to arrive at the Lingzhou General's Manor on the 3rd day of the 1st month. He purposely mentioned the 3 secret letters in the corridor. Su Fengyan gave the Li family time and time again. At this moment, there was still only 1 secret letter on the table. In this game of chess, Bailiang, who had the geographical advantage, would not lose no matter what. It was only a matter of winning more or losing less. However, to Su Fengyan, he would lose no matter what. He asked for it. He was alone. Su Beiji said it well. Chapter 9:35. Because the imperial court had appointed a crown prince and conferred titles to various kings, the emperor had personally decreed a general amnesty and changed the name of the year to Xiangfu. In the first year of Xiangfu, when the sound of firecrackers welcomed the new year, there were still court officials on duty. An old man in his 60s walked unsteadily toward Zhang Hut with wine and a bag in his hand. Along the way, he occasionally met him. Regardless of whether it was the son of heaven's personal attendants or the eunuchs who could wear bright red python robes, when they met this old man, without exception, they all took the initiative to stop and throw the rules and regulations of the palace to the back of their minds. They all exchanged a few pleasantries with a smiling face. If it were an ordinary person, once they were discovered, they would definitely be remembered by the head eunuch of the ceremony directorate, Han Diaosi. Sooner or later, they would not be able to bear the consequences. However, now that the ceremony directorate had changed its head, celebrating the beginning of spring, and the target was Tantanon, who was liked by everyone in the imperial court, both inside and outside the palace, there was no need to be afraid of being used against them. Even if there were people who wanted to make trouble for the emperor would only reprimand those people for gossiping. Huan Wen, who had replaced Sun Shiji as the new head of the province, greeted everyone along the way and arrived at Zhang Hut. From a distance, he saw the Minister of Revenue, Wang Xiong'e, standing under the eaves, rubbing his hands and exhaling. This Jiangnan scholar, who came from a humble family, could be considered an extremely young and strong man in the imperial court that was full of white hair. Along with many of the pillars of the imperial court, he had relied on the imperial examination to become a carp jumping over the Dragon's Gate during the Yonghui era. Furthermore, in that year's imperial examination, Wang Xiongui, who ranked 1st and 3rd, was the youngest of the top 3. The teacher who presided over the imperial examination was the Grand Secretary Zhang Jiulu. The teacher who read the examination papers was coincidentally the Left Chancellor of the Imperial College at that time, Huan Wen. Relying on his talent in running the country and helping the world, he had climbed up the ranks to become the Minister of Revenue. Wang Xiongui was undoubtedly part of the Zhang faction. Even though he had become a minister, he had always treated Zhang Jiulu and Huan Wen as disciples. At this moment, without waiting for Huan Wen to approach Zhang Hut, he hurriedly ran down the stairs to help Huan Wen take the wine jug and cloth bag. Huan Wen joked, "Fuding, why is that blue-eyed boy shutting the door to you again? This old fellow is really something. Yesterday you went to pay your New Year's greetings, and today he came again. It's obvious that he cares a lot about your favorite student, but he just can't bring himself to do it. It's fine, it's fine. In a moment, I'll just say that this pot of wine and salted peanuts were all brought by you. I don't believe that Bayeno won't be envious. If he can hold back his greed and just watch the two of us enjoy life, then I'll be helping you vent your anger, won't I?" Minister Wang, whose given name was Fu Ding, smiled wryly and said, "How could this junior dare to get angry with Grand Secretary Darren? Huan, sure, please don't make fun of Fu Ding. Besides, this junior didn't discipline him properly and let that good-for-nothing son of mine get into trouble. The entire capital is watching as a joke. This junior truly has let down Grand Secretary Darren and Huan Shi's expectations. Huanwen smiled. This Tantanon wasn't quite the same as those shrewd pillars of the imperial court who couldn't help but be suspicious of their dark temperaments. When the old man smiled, it wasn't a fake smile, and it didn't make people feel that there was a knife hidden in his smile. Instead, it made people feel that Sir Huan had truly encountered a happy occasion. Over the years, some of the senior ministers who had fallen on hard times liked to run over to Huan, one to reminisce about old times, bringing along a few pots of good wine. Whether or not this old man of the Huan residence could help was another matter. In short, if it was something that made people feel like there was still some leeway after he spoke of it. There were two things that Huan's didn't do. He didn't add flowers to brocade, and he didn't hit a person who was down. With Huan when leading him in a Zhonglu, Wang Xiongui had the courage to enter. Huan stopped in front of the door. Wang Xiongui had already put one foot in and could only obediently take it back. He heard the old man say softly, "Your youngest son is called Yuan Ran, right?" Even an old man like me, who doesn't leave the house, has heard of his great name. It can't be said that he has done a basket of bad things, but at least half a basket of bad things. Last autumn, he had a dispute with the heir of Bailiang at the Jiuzhou embassy. He was praised to the heavens by his accomplices, saying that he was the #1 silk pants in the capital and that he was the only one who dared to go against the heir. This originally wasn't much. Whether it was me or Bai Yin, we were all hot-blooded when we were young. Who didn't have a bit of vanity? It's just that your child is too bold now. He actually went to the Ministry of Personnel to bully Zhao Yuling's daughter. This daughter is even betrothed to Yin Maochuan's only son. Not only that, the son of the Ministry of Justice's Han Lin came out to say something fair and gave your son a beating. He even scolded his father for being a mere assistant minister in the Ministry of Justice. Fooding, if you count with your fingers in the 4 years of Yonghui, it was actually only the few of you who stood out together. Your relationship was generally not bad. After this incident, how are you going to meet Yin, Zhao, and Han, who are all officials at the same time? You and I both know that next year's imperial examinations will be presided over by Yin Maochuan. You and I both know the level of Yin Maochuan's ability as an official. He isn't called the head of the imperial court's prime ministers for nothing. After this year's imperial examinations, it will be the big event of the local officials' examinations. Zhao Yuling will definitely be the one in charge. How can your teacher not be fuming with anger? If I sat in Bai Yan's position, I would be just as angry. Wang Xiongui stomped his foot and sighed. He said in a low voice, "Teacher Huan, you don't know. My son Wang Yuanran was framed. Otherwise, he wouldn't have acted so rashly." Huanwen, who was known for his good temper, actually had a face full of anger. He suppressed his voice and scolded, "Idiot, flies don't bite seamless eggs. If your son was a good person, would he have the chance to be framed? The family's misfortune, the greatest misfortune, is that your descendants don't care about your fortune. He's already made such a big mistake. As his father, you're still thinking about how to clean up after Wang Yuanran's mess instead of mending the pen after the sheep are lost. If you Wang Xiongui aren't stupid, then what are you?" Chapter 9:36. Wang Xiongui stammered, not daring to retort. It was indeed hard for outsiders to imagine that a second-rank minister could be scolded so miserably. Huanwen still wasn't satisfied. He snatched the wine pot and cloth pouch, directly throwing down a string of harsh words. "I originally thought you'd come to understand before coming, but I didn't expect you to still be such a scoundrel. You can't even manage a son. What Ministry of Revenue? I, Huanwen, have always favored you. Fine, then you might as well not be some Minister of Revenue. Come to the Ministry of Revenue and be my assistant. You'll still be a second-rank official. How about it? So that your son won't rely on you, his father, to raise his tail to the sky and show that extremely unsightly light." Wang Xiongui was so scared that his face turned pale. Everyone in the court knew that Grand Secretary Zhang Jiulu was in charge of the Zhang faction, which was actually of the same origin. It was just that the banner was swapped with the character Zhang. In fact, it could be traced all the way back to Zhang Jiulu and Huanwen's benefactor teacher, who was the old Grand Secretary's benefactor teacher. Wang Xiongwei was undoubtedly the most popular candidate to take over Zhang Julu's position, both inside and outside the Zhang faction. To speak plainly, even if the emperor was dissatisfied with Wang Xiongwei's position as Minister of Revenue and demoted him, even demoting him to a provincial post, as long as the Zhang and Huan elders were still there, even in the court and outside, they still had great prestige. Wang Xiongwei wasn't afraid of not having a chance to return to the central government. However, if the Zhang and Huan elders felt that Wang Xiongwei couldn't bear the heavy responsibility and wasn't enough to support their branch, then Wang Xiongwei's career in this life could be considered to have come to an end. Huan gave a cold snort. Wang Xiongwei was dejected and didn't say anything. After careful consideration, he said bitterly, "Teacher Huan, this junior knows his wrongs. I won't enter the room and make the Grand Secretary worry. While there's still snow on the ground, I'll go back now and have Wang Yuanran kneel in front of Zhao Yuling's gate. I'll also personally pay a visit to Zhao Yuling to apologize." Huan nodded and laughed. "Fuding, you slippery fellow. What dog farts snow on the ground? Zhao Yuling's gate is filled with a sea of people. It's very clean. Why don't you find a handful of snow for me?" "Fine, fine. It's good that you know your wrongs. It's good that you've caused such a ruckus. It'll teach your son a lesson. Wang Yuanran is not stupid. Even if you keep a straight face, he can still see the love in your eyes. Plus, your wife is soft-hearted. She can't stand the crying of her young son. This time, she made him lose a layer of skin. Sooner or later, she will secretly compensate him more. Tell Wang Yuanran that if he dares to cause trouble again, I'll tell Yao Baifeng to throw him into the Imperial College for 3 to 5 years." The Minister of Revenue, who had Tannan personally intervened to help him deal with his family affairs, had tears in his eyes. His lips trembled as he said, "Teacher Huan's kindness, this junior is unable to repay." Huan shook his head and sighed. "These small favors I've given you are nothing. The one inside is the one who really thinks highly of you. Fuding, you must not disappoint him." Wang Xiongwei nodded heavily. Huan returned the wine jug and cloth pouch to him. "My trip into the palace this time was for you. There is a beginning and there is an end. Come, let's go in and meet our Grand Secretary." Entering Zhang Lu, the purple-bearded and blue-eyed Zhang Julu still did not give the Minister of Revenue any face. However, he reluctantly accepted the wine and peanuts. The civil officials of Zhang Lu, who were buried in their books, quietly raised their heads and smiled knowingly at the Minister of Revenue. Wang Xiongwei did not stay long. He quickly bid farewell and left in a hurry. Zhang Julu and Huan came to the room that was specially used to receive outsiders. Huan was very familiar with Zhang Lu. He brought in his own utensils and began to leisurely boil wine. He said to himself, "The court says that you and I, one playing good cop and one playing bad cop, cooperate seamlessly. I didn't think so before, but now I can only pinch my nose and admit it. Tell me, Fuding is such an ambitious, capable, and intelligent official. He has already reached the high position of Minister of Revenue. The Ministry of Revenue is well organized, so why can't he manage his own residence well?" Zhang Jilu calmly said, "What's so strange about this? Most people become officials to seek the good fortune of their descendants. Besides, don't look at how Wang Yuanran suddenly became a street rat in the capital. In fact, in front of his father, he is very clever and clever. The sons of officials are mostly like this. It's not that they are stupid, but that they are too smart. They have long been influenced by the ways of the officialdom to flatter and bully those below. I dare say that this is the first time Wang Xiongwei knows that his youngest son is so muddle-headed. This is also why every year there are many officials who do not fall at the hands of their political opponents, but fall at the hands of their own children and grandchildren. It's not strange for father and son to be in court together, but it's rare for 3 generations to be in court together. Even if the positions of the 3 are not high and their ranks are not high, whether they are good or bad officials, at least they are truly intelligent officials." Huan, whose nose had been frozen to a brandy, smelled the aroma of the wine and asked with a smile, "Then how many generations do you think there are in Bailiang?" Zhang Jilu calmly said, This question, you have to ask the mysterious Huang Xianxia. I don't know, and I don't want to know. What's done is done, and that's more important than anything else. As for how far you can see, in the end, it depends on how far you can walk. Huanwen laughed heartily. Zhang Julu stretched out his hand. Huanwen said in surprise, "You want to drink wine? Bai Yin, you want to get a concubine? Congratulations, congratulations." Zhang Julu glanced at him unhappily. He poured himself a bowl of hot wine, drank a mouthful, and said with a smile, "I've thought about it." Huanwen nodded and said, "Me too." As soon as the 2 letters were sent, I felt some regret. It seems that you and I have both been tricked. That kid, the younger generation, will surpass us in time. Borrowing our hands, he began to deal with Bailiang. However, I am now quite curious. Did Golden Thread Weaver Li Shifeng also get deceived, or is he already in cahoots with Bailiang? Zhang Jilu asked in return, "Is there a difference?" Of all the civil and military officials in the imperial court, only he, Tantanon, could keep up with Grand Secretary Zhang's thoughts. He nodded and said, "That's true. Li Shifeng has made great contributions in the end. Moreover, he even made Yin Jieshi owe him a huge favor. We still need to let him return to the capital with dignity. However, based on your unyielding nature when dealing with Ji Province's Han family 20 years ago, Li Shifeng doesn't have this type of fortune," Zhang Jilu said with a laugh. "Only after giving my grandson New Year's money did I remember that I am already an old man in my 50s. It is also time for me to have this type of temperament." Huan released an "oh" sound, saying teasingly, "What? You're finally starting to seek a path of retreat." Zhang Jilu shook his head, his eyes firm and resolute. He slowly spat out 2 words, "I won't." Huan said quietly, "Don't worry, I won't let your Baiyener die without descendants." Zhang Jilu swayed the wine bowl, saying in self-mockery, "It's difficult." Huan suddenly said with a deadly earnest expression, "Don't you still have a daughter who hasn't married yet? In the future, Bailiang still lacks an official consort. What do you think of this idea?" Zhang Jilu was so angry that he laughed and said, "Get lost." In the distance, Zhang Jilu's important ministers all clearly heard the Grand Secretary's vulgar words, looking at each other in dismay. Chapter 9:37. The officialdom of Lingzhou originally thought that His Highness the Crown Prince, who had suffered in Lingzhou, would most likely have asked the great general for an imperial sword and was going to start a massacre in Lingzhou. They never thought that Lingzhou city would still be as calm as before. This made people wonder, could it be that the administrator was really so highly regarded, that he was so powerful that the great general had no choice but to look at him differently and give him a completely different ending than Huaihua, great general Zhonghongwu? Many fence-sitters who wanted to squeeze their way into the Lingzhou general's manor thought about it carefully and felt that it was best to first go to the Li manor to pay a New Year's visit. Adding on the fact that the housekeeper of the general's manor, Sun Falu, was famous for being unreasonable, he spread the word that the manor would not be welcoming visitors, so there were not many officials who went there to look for trouble. However, at noon on the 6th day of the first month, when Huangnam County Governor Song Yin moved his family into Lingzhou City, he did not stay in the administrator's manor of his teacher, Li Gongda. Instead, he moved into the general's manor. This made many people confused. However, when His Royal Highness moved into the official residence, he did not show his face because he dragged Su Beiji to the west of the city to drink. The coachman was changed from Su Yanbing to Han Laozhan, who was from the same sect and was also the deputy general of Lingzhou. Other than the pair of persimmons and oranges, there was also Pei Nanwei, who had taken off her snow-swept fox fur coat and changed into plain clothes. However, she still kept her loose mink hat. Then there was Wang Wolfting and his close friend from the same hometown, Sun Yin. There was also Wang Yinshu, who just so happened to come over to familiarize himself with them. Among the 5 young masters of similar ages, other than Sun Yin, who looked ordinary and old-fashioned, the 4 of them were rather eye-catching when gathered together. Luckily, they were drinking at the bottom of the city, so they were not recognized by the sharp-eyed people. When they were drinking, Wang Yinshu and Wang Wolfting were both figures of the 4 kings of Huangnan and knew each other very well. Moreover, the two of them were also one of the four tyrants of Lingzhou back in the day, so they did not seem to be unfamiliar with each other. Only Sun Yin, who was temporarily working as a shabby private tutor in the Wang family of Zijin, did not seem to fit in. Even though Su Beiji took the initiative to talk to him a few times, Sun Yin could only be considered to be able to respond appropriately. However, he was never able to take advantage of the opportunity to expand the topic. It was as if he was born to not be the center of attention at the same table. Su Fengyin naturally compared Sun Yin to Chen Shiliang, who had a similar background, and was somewhat disappointed. Whether it was in front of him or Su Xiao, Chen Shiliang had never shown the slightest bit of stage fright. Su Fengyin was now in urgent need of scholars that could be used immediately. People like Su Beiji could be casually tossed into any county and he would be able to flourish on his own. There was no need for him to worry about him at all. If not for this, Su Fengyin was not a deity. How would he be able to take care of everything? Wang Lifting, who had good observation skills, had secretly stepped on Sun Yin's feet a few times under the table. The stubborn Sun Yin was still as stubborn as before. The aroma of the big pot of dog stew on the table filled the air. They had also drunk more than 10 caddies of green ant wine. It was about time to pay the bill and leave. Wang Lifting lamented in his heart. This clan head of the Wang clan of purple gold knew very well how the first impression was. It was incomparably important. There were so many so-called talented people in the world who did not get the chance to meet them. In fact, most of them were idiots who did not know how to find the right opportunity to recommend themselves. It was not as if a man had talent. It was not as obvious as a woman who was pregnant at first glance. It was no wonder that others could not tell the difference between good and bad. However, the problem was that Wang Lifting was more certain than anyone else that Sun Yin was not a pedantic scholar who only knew how to read books. This was what made him feel so regretful. Although he, Wang Lifting, was the new favorite of His Royal Highness, he could not be so foolish as to tell His Royal Highness that Sun Yin's talent was extraordinary. It was His Royal Highness who could not recognize a fine steed, not His Royal Highness. If Wang Lifting was really so impetuous, he would not be able to sit firmly on the seat of the clan head of the Wang clan of purple gold. The seat was also stained with the blood of many of his clansmen. Don't judge Wang Lifting by his scholarly and elegant demeanor. With one hand, he lured the bandits into having evil thoughts at the sight of wealth. With the other, he used a large sum of money to hire the authorities to suppress the bandits. Without any hesitation, he killed nearly half of his uncle's family of more than 40 people, leaving only a few old, young, women, and children behind. Not a single one of the 18 bandits was left alive. The two groups of people parted ways. Wang Lifting left with Sun Yin, while Wang Yunshu led his horse and rode together for a distance. Then, he said that he did not lack friends in the capital and that he had to go to the brothel to fool around. Then, he spurred his horse and left. Ever since Wang Lifting became the clan head, the two young masters who were originally on good terms with each other gradually drifted apart. On the other side of the road, Su Fengyin bought a stick of sugar-coated haws and bit into it. Su Beiji was silent for a long time. In the end, he could not help but ask, "You really don't plan on using Sun Yin, who has the potential to become the second Yao Baifeng of Beiliang?" Su Fengyin, who was busy dealing with the sugar-coated haws, said vaguely, "Even if I want to use him, it would be a headache to put him in an official position. With his personality, regardless of whether he is a scholar or not, once he reaches the county, if I just leave him alone, this fellow will be beaten up by the old foxes until he dies of depression. If I have to take out a very large official's hat for him to wear, to be honest, I really am not willing to do so. That's because giving it to anyone would be more useful than giving it to Sun Yin. At the very least, it would be more effective than giving it to Sun Yin. It's just that letting him be kidnapped by Yao Baifeng to go to the Imperial College in the capital is also inappropriate. The Imperial Court is blessed with a unique environment and skilled craftsmen to carefully polish this piece of unpolished jade. If in the future Sun Yin becomes a powerful official in the Imperial Court and Beiliang has another Zhang Jiulu as an enemy, I would regret it so much that my intestines would turn green with regret. But to put him under house arrest in Bailiang for the rest of his life, regardless of sentiment or reason, is not kind. Yao Baifeng said that he is a scholar who has won 3 yuans in a row. In the end, if he ends up in my hands, it will be a waste of his life. If word gets out, it won't be good. Su Beiji smiled and said, "You think that Sun Yin is a chicken rib, tasteless to eat but a pity to throw away?" Su Fengyin nodded his head. Unexpectedly, Su Beiji shook his head and said, "Not necessarily." Su Fengyin handed half a stick of sugar-coated haws to Pei Nanwei, who was sitting quietly. Unexpectedly, she took it calmly and bit off one of the haws and put it in her mouth. Su Fengyin did not have a mood to flirt and continued to say to Su Beiji, "Capable people have more work to do. Why don't you help me test Sun Yin? I really don't have time to care about him. I am about to leave Lingzhou and participate in the military training at the border with Su Xiao." Su Beiji said decisively, "If he is handed over to me, even if I become the governor of Lingzhou, don't expect Sun Yin to be loyal to you. As long as he is a scholar who doesn't have a bit of pride. Sun Yin is especially obvious." Su Fengyin frowned and said, "It's not a problem anyway. What do you want me to do?" Su Beiji said softly, "There's a way that saves you the most trouble. Do you want to hear it?" Su Fengyin rolled his eyes and said, "Don't talk nonsense." Su Beiji said calmly, "If you can't use him, then kill him. Kill him secretly. You can drown him by accident or poison him slowly. Anyway, you're familiar with this. Wang Lifting is ambitious. Before he becomes the golden thread weaver, let him know what it means to show mercy and severity." Pei Nanwei turned to look at this Beimang remnant and made up her mind to stay away from this person. Just as Su Fengyin was about to speak, he saw a group of riders galloping on the street in a domineering manner. Immediately, the whole street was in chaos. Fortunately, the people seemed to be used to it. The women ran with their children, the hawkers ran as fast as they could, and the men in the middle of the street jumped and dodged. Practice makes perfect. This undoubtedly increased the arrogance of the group of hedonistic young masters. Most of the young masters were wearing fur coats and had knives and swords hanging on their necks. There was even a young woman with fiery eyes and a vicious aura that did not lose out to the group of hedonistic young masters. The horse she rode was a very outstanding breed, the Yellow Dragon Hussar. It was not much inferior to the Western region's Fergana horses that were hard to buy with money. Among the group of horses, she and the leader, the White Hoof Shadow, were the most expensive and eye-catching. Su Fengyin looked on coldly from the side with a calm expression. The White Hoof Shadow only glanced at Su Fengyin from the side of the street and then passed by. Unexpectedly, the young mistress of the Yellow Dragon Hussar had sharp eyes. At first, she only saw the 2 handsome young men's appearance, and then she saw the woman beside them coincidentally raising her head and revealing her appearance. She deftly lashed out with her whip and knocked off the beautiful woman's mink hat. Not only that, she stopped the horse and turned it around. The horse's hooves stomped heavily on the street. When she was about 10 steps away, she shook her soft golden horsewhip and looked down at the woman and 2 men with evil intentions. She clicked her tongue and said, "It's strange that we can meet such a beautiful woman here. Gauderun, come quickly. I guarantee that you won't have to go to the brothel to throw money for a year. If you take her back home, I bet that your 2 mosquito legs won't have the strength to go out and drink anymore." Su Fengyin bent down to pick up the mink hat from the ground and handed it to Pei Nanwei, but she glared at him angrily. Pei Nanwei was, after all, the former Princess Jing. It was true that she was angry at the young woman's ignorance and rudeness, but she didn't want to lower herself to her level. However, this person surnamed Su could clearly block the whip, but he still watched as she was humiliated. This made Pei Nanwei extremely angry. Su Fengyin saw that she didn't accept the mink hat, so he smiled and put on his head. The young woman stopped her horse, and the group of horses quickly turned around and returned. The eyes of the young man, who was called Gout to Run, lit up, and he was shocked. He didn't say anything as he jumped off his horse and rushed towards Pei Nanwei. He was about to throw her onto the back of a horse and return home. Su Fengyin waved his hand and signaled for Han Lao's Han. who was secretly following them, to not show himself. He then took a step forward and kicked out with a seemingly soft kick. The young man, surnamed Gao, might have thin arms and legs that could be blown away by a gust of wind, but he was actually considered an expert in Lingzhou. He gave a sinister laugh and pushed off with the tip of his foot. With a beautiful flip of his body, he pounced towards the fellow who looked like an embroidered pillow. Su Fingyan, who was teasing him, smiled and suddenly took a large step forward. The tall young man had just heard his companion shout for him to be careful when he was pushed in the chest by a palm. His entire body was thrown from one side of the street to the other. Unfortunately, he crashed into the hard wall between two shops and fell to the ground. It was unknown whether he was dead or alive. The main culprit, the woman, had a gloomy expression. She held onto the horse whip with both hands and used all her strength to straighten it. Her eyes were vicious. Chapter 9:38. The young master that reminded the tall young master to be careful narrowed his eyes and touched the mane of the white hoof shadow he was riding. He said in a deep voice, "Committing murder on the street for no reason and disregarding the law. Do you not know how the word death is written?" Su Fingyan pulled on the edge of his mink hat with both hands. His body flashed, and he slapped the white-hoofed shadow's head. The horse that was worth 300 taels of silver did not even have the time to cry out before it died on the spot. The horse's hooves bent, and it fell to the ground, scaring the young master so much that he quickly jumped up and retreated a few dozen feet away. He did not even have the desire to test the opponent's strength. Su Beiji sighed. At this moment, not to mention you half-baked Yamen officials, even if the insufferably arrogant Yan Wenwan were to appear, she would also be beaten by His Highness the Heir Apparent, who was full of resentment and had nowhere to vent. Su Fingyan took a deep breath and suppressed his surging killing intent. He said expressionlessly, "Scram." The noble woman riding the yellow dragon hussar was so angry that she laughed. "Not bad. You do have some mediocre skills. This is the first time I've heard that Lingzhou has such a courageous Jianghu person. I've learned something new." The young master whose beloved horse had died on the street threw a look at his companion, and the horse galloped away. Su Fingyan glared at the woman on the horse, and then continued forward with Su Beiji. Su Beiji asked with a smile, "Do you feel better?" Su Fingyan said helplessly, "What are you talking about?" Su Beiji no longer behaved atrociously on his wound. She turned around and saw that the other nobles had put away their swords and sabers and slowed down their horses. They followed behind her, unwilling to leave. Their faces were full of ruthlessness and amusement, as if they were ready to watch a big joke. Su Beiji gently shook his head. A group of soldiers in bright armor quickly ran over under the lead of the knight who reported the news. They had an imposing manner. Su Beiji sneered. These foppish sons of rich families were not stupid. They knew that to deal with those Jianghu masters who were skilled in martial arts, it was effective to borrow the power of the government to kill them. Moreover, there was no need to worry about the consequences. It saved them money and effort, so why not? Su Beiji saw that the owner of the white hoof shadow was riding on the same horse as his companion. Obviously, he was not satisfied with the arrangement. He waved his hand and whispered to the person beside him, who then rode away. Su Beiji smiled. It seemed like he was determined to eliminate the source of the problem. Then, he called for more people to come and encircle them, in case the three of them were cornered and used their skills to escape. They should be a group of vicious and merciless sons of generals. They should be able to move a large number of local patrolling soldiers. Perhaps the power of patrolling the provincial capital was in the hands of one of their parents. Lingzhou was a good place for generals at the border to enjoy their retirement. There were many miscellaneous generals, military captains, and even more ruffians. Back then, the administrator was powerless to suppress the rebellion of the officials in Lingzhou. Part of the reason was because Surly did not do anything. More importantly, the administrator was a rare pure civil official in Beiliang. Even if he really wanted to discipline the Lingzhou military captains who held real power, he still had to spend a large amount of effort in relationships. The imbalance between civil and military in Beiliang had been going on for a long time. The scholars had died, and the internal and external conflicts had unknowingly increased the complexity of the situation in Bailiang. The group of soldiers who rushed over first were all eager to give it a try. They held the hilts of their knives and waited for the captain's orders. Just as the daughter of Captain Dong had said, it was rare to see Jianghu heroes who dared to cause trouble in Lingzhou, much less in the heavily guarded provincial capital. The Lotus Pond in Huangnan County, which had a martial arts grandmaster watching over, was instantly reduced to ashes. This shocking news had already spread throughout Lingzhou during the New Year's greetings in the first month. It made the large and small gangs in Lingzhou tremble in fear. This year, the silver that they gave to the officials had all been increased by a few times. The captain pulled out his knife with a vicious smile and was about to capture the three of them to report to Sir Zhou and Dong Yueqi. They had just celebrated the New Year, so it was really a good start. The streets were very busy. Wang Lifting and Sun Yin followed in the crowd. Seeing this scene, Wang Lifting did not know whether to laugh or cry. He was hesitating whether he should go out and stop those people whose eyeballs were on their butts. Sun Yin shook his head and said, "Let's wait and see." Wang Lifting said softly, "I told you just now, His Highness is not the kind of person who likes to make a fuss. Moreover, the reason why His Highness came out this time was to see you. I'm sorry to get involved in this kind of trouble." Sun Yin pointed at his own head and said calmly, Sun Yin had already finished studying when he was 14. After that, you always asked me what I was doing. I can tell you now. Since ancient times, there have been secret techniques of the emperor that were used to control the officials. However, I have half of the long and short positive and negative sutra that I wrote. It can be used to analyze, counter, and balance the techniques of the emperor. After Master Yao went to the capital, it was not that I did not want to go to the emperor, but I could not. If I went, I would die. Sun Yin is very afraid of death. How could I not see His Royal Highness hiding his strength and biding his time? Since he was able to make the four princes of Huangnan County go from being united on the surface to completely breaking up, it proves that His Highness is like what I told you that night. He chose the middle of the road to govern Lingzhou. However, what Sun Yin wanted, even if it was a hereditary position of His Royal Highness, he still could not give it. Sun Yin, rather than selling what you have learned against your will, it is better not to sell it. Wang Lifting said regretfully, "Can't you learn a compromise?" Sun Yin sneered. "Then what is the difference between you and Administrator Ligongda?" Wang Lifting hurriedly shut her mouth and obediently watched the commotion in the distance. She was afraid that this fellow beside her would say something disgraceful. Bailiang was poor. Perhaps it was because there were not many broken pots left. Those who were barefooted were never afraid of those who were wearing shoes. Since ancient times, the people were valiant. They were used to fighting. It was only after Su Zhao's arrival that they became more restrained. However, the competitive blood that flowed in their bones did not fade away. At this moment, there was a rare fight between a commoner and an official. Many men were cheering and making a ruckus. However, no one thought that when a man in normal clothes walked out, there was not even a single drop of rain, let alone loud thunder and small raindrops. The arrogant daughter of the Dong family was stunned, as if she had been possessed by a ghost. She hurriedly got off her horse and walked in front of the man. The people in the distance could not hear what was said. They could only see the man's cold expression. The daughter of the lieutenant of Yuqi did not become angry out of embarrassment. She still stood there uneasily. Outsiders did not know the situation here, but the friends of the daughter of the Dong family were all scared out of their wits. They all rolled off their horses as if they were walking on thin ice. The squad leader quickly sheathed his sword and led the soldiers under him to kneel in front of him. As it turned out, Dong Zhen, the daughter of the second most powerful lieutenant in Lingzhou, Dong Yueqi, recognized this man as the deputy general of Lingzhou with the surname Han. When Deputy General Han was inspecting the military camp before the new year, Dong Zhen just happened to be wandering around nearby. She glanced at him from afar and felt that this uncle was imposing. Even her father, who could cover the sky with one hand in Lingzhou, was far from being able to compare. She could only accompany him from the side. Afterwards, she heard her father carefully mention that Deputy General Han had entered Lingzhou with His Royal Highness. There was no need to pay attention to His Royal Highness, who had never appeared outside of the general's estate. As long as they did not clash with him head-on, His Royal Highness would have to leave Lingzhou with his tail between his legs sooner or later. However, Deputy General Han could not be provoked. Not only was this person the junior brother of the immortal spear Wuxia, whose martial arts were unparalleled, he was also the general's personal retainer. In the future, he would be an official in Lingzhou for a long time. Dong Zhen did not dare to show off in front of this legendary man who could be said to be invincible. However, from her point of view, she was in the right to cause such a big commotion. Moreover, she did not think that General Han would be so calculative with a girl of the younger generation like her. However, when Dong Zhen saw the young man in the mink hat walk to General Han's side and whisper something to which General Han could only nod his head, Dong Zhen was instantly scared out of her wits. In such a big Lingzhou city, who could treat Han Laozhan like this? Was there even a need to guess the identity of that person? Dong Zhen was the first to wake up and kneeled heavily on the ground. When the other hedonistic sons saw this, they were so scared that they peed their pants. They all kneeled down one after another and did not even dare to breathe loudly. Han Laozhan said with a stiff tone, "All of you kneel and ask someone to bring the person with the highest authority in your family. I will give you 5 incense sticks worth of time. If no one comes, I will directly twist off your heads." Dong Zhen wanted to cry, but had no tears. They all had to kneel obediently. So who was going to ask for help? The young man in the mink hat chuckled and said, "Let this group of soldiers who have worked hard for the people of Lingzhou go and pass on the message. Soldiers, hurry up and ride their horses. There are not many opportunities like this. A single horse is worth more than all of your belongings. At that time, if any one of these people dies, the skin on your body will be peeled off in anger. Not only the armor on your body, you will also lose a layer of your skin." The squad leader gathered his courage and stood up. With him taking the lead, the soldiers under him also stood up hesitantly. Su Fengyin said to the squad leader, "I have counted. You just happen to be one more person. You stay here. The rest of you go and pass on the message. That's right. Tell their elders that those who have been military officers must all wear their armor." Dong Zhen even had the thought of dying. When she lowered her head, her eyes were filled with fear and resentment. Almost half an incense stick's worth of time had passed. In the distance, on the increasingly crowded street, the crowd only saw the young man in the mink hat who should have a great background. He took off the saber at the waist of the squad leader and then quietly squatted down with the saber across his knees. Chapter 9:39. This caused the spectators to be greatly disappointed. In the past few years, they had gotten used to the domineering behavior of the 4 Lingzhou ruffians. According to common sense, all crows in the world were as black as one another. Shouldn't the winner of the competition of backing and family background be the one to take care of those pitiful fellows who lost? Otherwise, how could they be the playboys of Lingzhou if they were so friendly? Wang Lifting asked curiously, "What is going on? Are you trying to make an example out of the Lingzhou officials and the families of these people to lower their heads? But looking at the current situation, it doesn't look like you're really going to kill them. If you really want to wait until those officials arrive before you kill them, then you can only kill them verbally, and it will be hard for them to accept it." Sun Yin said slowly, "The worst plan is to kill randomly, killing the playboys and officials to establish our might in the eyes of the people of Lingzhou. In the end, it will make the military officials and officials of Lingzhou and the officials of the Yamen work together against a common enemy. The current situation is like burning our eyebrows. The best plan is to not kill anyone and treat it as doing a favor to those families. At least, they won't look too bad in the future. Both sides will be at peace for the time being, but it won't help with the situation in Lingzhou. The soldiers at the border of Yu and Liang will look down on His Royal Highness. The best plan, in the current situation, there is almost no best plan to speak of." Wang Lifting smiled. "Almost." Sun Yin said calmly, "There is, but I don't think His Royal Highness can do it." Wang Lifting continued to ask, "Tell me about it." Sun Yin gave a rare smile. "If it ends up muddle-headedly and you treat me to good wine and I get drunk, I'll tell you. Anyway, in Bailiang, I, Sun Yin, am destined to be neither high nor low. Since I can't live happily, then I can only drink happily." After the time it took for 4 incense sticks to burn, horses galloped over one after another. Fortunately, most of them were generals and had excellent horsemanship. There was only one civil official who had never been on the battlefield, but he was also quick-witted. He let his squire ride the horse and rode with him. He did not care about his bearing and demeanor, and hugged the squire's waist tightly. The captain of the Yu cavalry, Dong Hongxiu, was the furthest away, but he still arrived at the same time as the civil official. Of the 4 military officials who arrived before him, one was the director of the Lingzhou army, one was a general with a title, and 2 military captains with real power. They were all kneeling on the ground with their descendants. That foppish playboy who had fainted after hitting the wall was also dragged over. Lord Zhou, who was in charge of the county's documents, also ran away quickly. His body was faster than Dong Yueqi, and he fell to the ground neatly. He cried, "Humble Zhou Jianshu pays his respect to His Royal Highness. My unfilial son has disturbed His Royal Highness. I deserve to die." One must know that this Lord Zhou of the Lingzhou army was one of the people who had entered the general's residence that day. In the study room, he had received His Royal Highness's promise. Even if he did not get promoted and become rich, at least no matter how Lingzhou rose and fell, he, Zhou Jianshu, would still be able to keep his position as the 3rd highest civil official in Lingzhou. Young Master Zhou riding the white hoof shadow was the unfilial son that Lord Zhou had mentioned. Even Zhou Zhizhong, who had Commander Yin Wanluan as his back, had obediently knelt down. The director of the army and the military captains all felt a little better. Only Dong Yueqi remained standing. He cupped his fists and said in a deep voice, "Humble General Dong Hongxiu pays his respect to His Royal Highness." He was standing, but His Royal Highness was still squatting. Zhou Zhizhong saw this scene from the corner of his eyes. He lowered his head a little more, but the corners of his lips curled up. The entire Lingzhou officialdom knew that Dong Hongxiu was old General Zhong's trusted subordinate. Furthermore, because Dong Hongxiu had joined the army at a young age, he was a military official who had experienced the spring and autumn war. Otherwise, he would not have been able to become the captain of Lingzhou's Yuqi. Who knew how many generals who had retired from the border were eyeing this kind of prominent position? If one did not have any true ability, even if they were lucky enough to become one, they would be kicked down. In truth, even the normal citizens who did not like Dong Zhen and Zhou Jianshu felt that it was right for Dong Yueqi to not kneel to His Royal Highness who had no achievements. His Royal Highness gripped his Bailiang blade and slowly stood up. He did not fly into a rage like Dong Hongxiu had expected. He did not even try to use his status as Bailiang's heir or Lingzhou's general to force him to kneel. Han Laozhan, who was standing respectfully behind His Royal Highness, was about to take a step forward when Su Fengnian waved his hand. Su Fengnian stood with the blade in his hand. His hands were gently placed on the hilt of the blade. He said with a slight smile, "Everyone, do not worry. This heir has not suffered much. It is not that your sons and grandsons do not want to commit sins, but that they do not have the ability. It does not matter if they are wastrels who can't do anything right, or if they are parasites who only know how to enjoy their achievements. It does not have much to do with this heir. This heir has been unreasonable in Bailiang for almost 20 years. There are indeed many things that are unreasonable. In this aspect, I am just like your sons and grandsons. However, using this opportunity today, I want to tell you about a small principle that this heir knows." Dong Yueqi sneered and said, "Oh, since His Royal Highness has the leisure to do this, I am willing to hear the details." Su Fengnian smiled and said, "Actually, there is no need for this heir to say anything. Come, other than Sir Zhizhong, help the other officials take off their armor." The military officials, kneeling on the ground, all suddenly raised their heads. After being stunned, they could not hide their anger. Among them, the military official who was over 50 years old stood up with a dark expression. "I have risked my life for your Su family to have the glory I have today. Now, all of this wealth belongs to me. I can be killed, but not humiliated. Although my grandson has offended his superiors, he has not harmed you at all. Even if you are the eldest son of the great general and his royal highness of Arbalion, my grandson's life is not good. He lost to you, a young man who could immediately become a general of Lingzhou. If you, Su Fengyan, want to beat him, I will accept it. However, if you want to humiliate me, there is no way. I have lived for so long. I don't believe that you would dare to kill all of these people on the streets. If that is the case, then I was blind to work for your Su family in the past. After the surplus general and the two captains looked at each other, they gritted their teeth and stood up. The group of commoners who could only see the general situation from afar had already begun to cheer loudly. There were people who said that the men of Lingzhou were good. There were also people who whispered to each other that these officials were not good at being officials, but their temperaments were to their liking. Pei Nanwei looked at the back of that figure. She couldn't help but recall the soul-stirring scene she had witnessed all those years ago in the reed marsh outside Xianxia City. She, who should have been rejoicing in other people's misfortune, was a bit dispirited. Su Fengyan did not use his blade. He only tilted his head slightly. Han Laozhan, who was already filled with killing intent, rushed out and kicked the unyielding Dong Yueqi forward. Han Laozhan then elbowed him in the back. Dong Hongqiu's 170 to 80 catty-burly body was forcefully smashed onto the street, causing dust to fly everywhere. Dong Yueqi, who even the administrator in Lingzhou could not order around, was now lying on the ground. He struggled to get up, but Han Laozhan, who had already deliberately restrained his strength, stepped on his back. He had completely become a dead dog covered in dust. All of the commoners were terrified. Zhou Jianshu's throat moved as he swallowed a mouthful of saliva. Dong Zhen and Zhou Jianshu's group were so shocked that their faces lost all color. Even the old soldier of Lingzhou, who had not heard the horn of the battlefield for a long time and had not seen the smoke of the battlefield for a long time, began to tremble. Su Fengyan raised his Bailiang blade and pointed at the corporal whose legs were trembling. Go, take off all of Sir Dong's clothes. Take it off, one after the other. Su Fengyan gloomily added, I'm rarely reasonable. Don't be ungrateful when you're enjoying it. Dong Yueqi let out a tragic roar. After he was not stopped by Han Laozhan, he staggered up. Yueqi Field Officer Dong Hongqiu, will take off my armor today. From today onwards, I am no longer a soldier of Bailiang. The soldier's eyes were also red. His voice was hoarse as he laughed. Go to your mother. What kind of Lingzhou official is this? Huang Zhong will also take off his armor. Thus, other than the civil official Zhou Jianshu, everyone else took off their arms in the middle of winter. It was both comical and tragic. Back then, for General Su Xiao, he put on his armor and fought to the death. Now, because of his royal highness, he took off his armor. The commoners did not know who was the leader, but they became more and more furious. If it was not for the normal soldiers blocking their path, they would have charged forward like a swarm of bees. That damned His Royal Highness just stood there coldly and did not move at all. Wang Lifting, who was mixed in the crowd, turned his head and asked with trembling lips, Sun Yin, what should we do? Sun Yin narrowed his eyes and stared at that person of the same age without saying a word. Dong Zhen threw away her horse whip and stood beside her father. She covered her mouth as tears streamed down her face. Sir Zhizhong was also forcefully helped up by his unfilial son. Su Fengyan's eyes were cold as he said calmly, Dong Hongqiu, currently a grade 4U cavalry captain in Lingzhou. 26 years ago, he joined Su Zhao's army and followed Chu Lushan to open Shu. He was the first to reach the top of Chunshan Pass. In this battle, he was stabbed 4 times. Huang Zhong, currently a grade 4 military officer in Lingzhou. During the Battle of Xianxia City, he was a death warrior of the vanguard camp. He climbed the city walls 6 times and was injured 6 times until he could no longer fight. Of the 800 death warriors of the vanguard camp, only 19 survived after the battle. Han Yuan, together with his brothers Honghe and Hongshan, were the first crossbowmen in Liangzhou. Together, they cut off 21 heads of Beimang scouts. His brothers died one after another. Han Yuan was heavily injured and could not even hold a teacup in his right hand. He had no choice but to retreat from the border. Su Xiao personally gave him the title of General Wei Yuan and promised that his eldest son could become an official when he was 20 years old. His Royal Highness did not even look at the other two fellows who relied on their father's contributions or silver to become captains. His Royal Highness held the Baoyang knife and turned to leave. He only left behind one sentence. Those who stand beside these three, go and count the scars on your ancestors and fathers. Chapter 940. Although the west side of Lingzhou was not as wealthy as the north side, there were many crouching tigers and hidden dragons. Most of the officials lived here. The inside story of the disturbance quickly spread throughout the taverns. Wang Wolfting and son Yin chose a restaurant that specialized in Jianan spring stew. They sat on the second floor near the railing and ordered the famous Camel's Peak stew that shook Baoyang. The clamor downstairs could not be separated from the farce on Wenquan Street. At first, they were cursing His Royal Highness's unscrupulous actions and humiliating Dong Yueqi, Huang Bing, Cao Cao, and the valiant bravery General Han Yuan. Not only did he use his status as Lingzhou's general to force them to kneel, he also wanted them to bare their upper bodies. This made the three so angry that they did not hesitate to take off their armors to express their intentions. They were determined to leave Baoyang and no longer work for the Su family. Afterwards, a few sharp-sighted officials joined in and found out that the matter was not so simple. It turned out that the young masters of the Dong and Zhou families rode their horses on the street to pick a fight with His Royal Highness first. They even mobilized soldiers to encircle this Lingzhou general. This made the outsiders who were cursing Su Fengyan for being a good-for-nothing restrain themselves. They still muttered that it was just a dog-eat-dog situation and that none of them were good people. Afterwards, more and more officials who knew the inside story revealed the truth. Endless rumors flowed into the various manors and restaurants of Lingzhou. Only then did the truth come to light. As a result, for the first time ever, Lingzhou, with its strong folk customs, became silent. The group of people who were the first to curse His Royal Highness the most fiercely were stunned with a guilty conscience. Wang Wolfting saw and heard this and felt relieved. He put down his chopsticks and saw that son Yin was still unmoved. He picked up some fragrant Camel's Peak meat with his chopsticks and put it in his mouth. Wang Wolfting asked with a smile, "This is your best plan?" At the time, I didn't know what your highness said. Without drawing a knife or killing anyone, you were actually able to make Dong Yueqi kneel in front of your highness back. I thought you were using the king of Baoyang and the lives of the entire clan to force Dong Yueqi to lower his head. Two old men who have been through hundreds of battles. One hugged his armor and cried while the other began to beat his grandson on the street. Interesting. Son Yin shook his head and said, "It's true that I had a plan, but your highness gave me the plan." In this way, not only would Dong Hongxiu and the others be convinced, but they would also not naively kowtow to the crown prince. At the very least, these few people would continue to be grateful to the second generation of the Su family for not forgetting their meritorious service. This would make the straightforward military officials feel more at ease than any verbal promise. They would be able to temporarily behave themselves in their respective circles and be willing to tactfully take a step back for His Highness the Crown Prince out of gratitude. However, the most important thing was that a crack appeared in the tight circle of Lingzhou's military officials. The military officials who had personally fought on the battlefield and the children of generals who had become officials because of their father's contributions would inevitably begin to size each other up. They would no longer be as close as before. As for the Su officials in Yamen who were the most familiar with changing the rudder, seeing that the upper echelons appeared united but were divided at heart, they would naturally do their work obediently. No one was stupid. The Lingzhou general could even subdue Dong Yueqi, who was supported by General Zhong Hongwu. So wouldn't it be easy for him to take care of them, this group of low-class shrimp soldiers and crab generals? The more His Royal Highness held the imperial sword in his hand, the higher he raised it but did not land on anyone, the more it would make people feel fear. Right now, His Highness still did not use the might of the King of Baoyang to chop down Dong Yueqi's yellow soldiers. Instead, He was thinking about their old friendship and using reason. However, His Royal Highness was a vicious person who even dared to make a move on Zhong Hongwu. In the past, no one praised him for his shrewdness. Everyone knew that the Lingzhou general was not a kind person with a bodhisattva's heart. Everyone guessed that there would be a bloody disaster in Lingzhou sooner or later. There would definitely be blood. Pushing down layer by layer, the administrator who lived in seclusion did not move. Zhou Jianshu, who had been kneeling the entire time, did not move. Right now, even the arrogant military officer behind Dong Yueqi did not move. Lu Ting, who do you think will be next? Wang Wolfting smiled knowingly. It can only be that group of Su officials who did not have a good year in Lingzhou's officialdom. Although you and I know that His Highness would not go as far as to glare at them, they do not know. They will only feel that a knife has fallen on their head. It will not fall, and it will make them wish they were dead. Sun Yi nodded his head with a lonely expression. Wang Wolfting asked softly, His Highness has such a mind, and you are still not willing to become an official. Sun Yi retorted, What kind of official? A county magistrate in charge of politics? An assistant to the governor of Lingzhou's 7 counties? Or an assistant to the governor's manor? Without waiting for Wang Wolfting to persuade him, Sun Yi laughed coldly. I can't even do it well. It is important to know oneself. Only by knowing oneself can one understand others. I, Sun Yi, have high standards but low abilities. After becoming a county magistrate, I have no one to rely on, and I am not willing to spend my time on dealing with those arrogant Su officials. If they want to take care of me, it will be easy. Even if His Highness is my backer, these stubborn people have many hidden methods to cut my flesh with a soft knife. No matter what I do, my hands and feet are tied. There is no one around me that I can use, and I cannot pass down any policies. In the end, it will cause the economy of my jurisdiction to wither and the people to have no way of making a living. Forget about the all-people's umbrella when I leave my post and get promoted. I am afraid I will be criticized by the people in the county every day. Could it be that when I, Sun Yi, become a county magistrate, I have to ask His Royal Highness to give me a large group of capable Su officials? As for assisting the governor and serving the provincial governor, Sun Yin's ability wasn't much better than his. Perhaps His Highness is a wise ruler who is sentimental and worthy of you. Wang Wolfting, submitting to him, worthy of Dong Yueqi and the others to change their impression of him, worthy of the 300,000 steel cavalry at the border to die for him. But to Sun Yi, it is useless. Wang Wolfting was slightly dejected. This was like the love between a man and a woman. There was a woman who was clearly very good, but he just did not like her. The two of them left the restaurant that was still bustling with noise and excitement. Compared to the past in Lingzhou City, it was obvious that there were many more elegant scholars who spoke with foreign accents. Wang Wolfting's heart was heavy as he walked into a secluded alley. Sun Yi did not like extravagance, so Wang Wolfting found him a clean house that was hidden in this alley. The somewhat tipsy Sun Yi said self-mockingly, Sun Yin's skills of learning and writing are unconventional, surpassing the ancients. It is a pity that the dragon-slaying skills that people ridiculed in the ancient books are indeed useless in Bailiang. Wolfting, you don't have to persuade me anymore. If you reject His Highness' invitation and become a private tutor in Zijin's Wang family, His Highness will be indebted to you and see you in a new light. Just treat it as Sun Yin's debt to Zijin for all these years. Wang Wolfting gritted his teeth and said, Sun Yi, with your talent and knowledge, how can you be a private tutor for the rest of your life? In the history books, it is natural that Wang Wolfting is missing, but it is absolutely impossible that you, Sun Yi, are missing. Wait until I finish weaving gold thread. I will send you there even if I have to die. Without waiting for Wang Wolfting to finish, Sun Yi angrily said, Shut up. This residential area was crisscrossed with alleys. But at night, it was deserted and quiet. A cough from a dark corner was particularly ear-piercing. Wang Wolfting felt as if he was struck by lightning, and his face turned pale. Sun Yi sighed. They stopped in their tracks and saw a young master wearing a mink felt hat walk out of the shadows and greet them with a smile. Wang Wolfting slowly knelt down and shut his mouth. He had just obtained riches and honor and was about to be toppled again. The affairs of the world were truly unpredictable. Su Fengnian smiled and said, "If you, Wang Wolfting, didn't have such feelings and only knew how to curry favor in the bureaucracy, you would be the next Yan Jeshijin Lanting. I really wouldn't feel at ease putting you in such an important position in the Weaving Bureau. Get up." Chapter 941. Sun Yin helped Wang Wolfting up and said calmly, "Sun Yin, His Highness is speaking from the bottom of his heart. In the future, don't worry about your golden thread weaving. Don't feel guilty towards me. Now that things have come to this, Sun Yin will also speak from the bottom of his heart. After meeting His Highness, my life has already been thrown on the chopping block. I might not be able to keep it. If nothing goes wrong, I will most likely die quietly. Only with Sun Yin's death can you, Wang Wolfting, Bailiang, and the imperial court have an explanation. Back then, when you kidnapped me to Lingzhou and asked me why I was going to die so generously, this is the reason." Su Fengnian looked at Sun Yin. "I can give my dragon-slaying skills a chance to be used, but I can't guarantee that it will be 10 or 20 years, or that it won't be successful in the end. However, for you, Sun Yin, at least there is a glimmer of hope. Do you want to make a big deal with me?" Unlike Wang Wolfting, who looked like he had lost his parents, Sun Yin remained calm and said with a smile, "If it was before today, Sun Yin wouldn't believe it even if he was beaten to death. However, at this time and place, I am willing to listen to His Highness' opinion. If Sun Yin feels that there is profit to be made, then this deal is done. In any case, Sun Yin only has one life. He has a stomach full of knowledge that is inappropriate for the times, so he won't lose much." Su Fengnian, who appeared alone, turned around and left. Sun Yin slowly followed. Wang Wolfting, whose limbs were weak, could only lean against the wall and gasp for breath. Wang Wolfting, who stood in the same place, originally thought that Sun Yin's life and death were uncertain. The best scenario would be him coming back alive. He didn't expect Sun Yin to return with a smile in just the time it takes for a stick of incense to burn. His eyes were bright and full of spirit. Sun Yin held the young master of the Wang family of Zijin's hand and said with a smile, "Wolfting, this is the last time we will see each other in this life." Wang Wolfting said in surprise, "His Highness still wants you to die?" Sun Yin shook his head and smiled. "Bad plan." Wang Wolfting heaved a sigh of relief. "Could it be that he wants you to be his trusted aide? In the future, I'll give advice and suggestions to His Highness." Sun Yin still shook his head. Medium strategy. Wang Wolfting, who had already tasted the bitterness of speaking too much, had an uncertain expression on his face. Sun Yin, who knew what he was thinking, still laughed and said, "It's still the best plan." Her Highness once again gave Sun Yin a pleasant surprise. "Lu Ting, don't think too much about it. You won't be able to figure out even if you break your head. If not for this, how could you deceive Zhang Jiulu, these old foxes?" Wang Wolfting gripped Sun Yin with all his strength and said with a laugh, "I'm not going to make a fuss over nothing, as long as you're living well. Wang Wolfting will be waiting quietly in Bailiang for you to go to the capital and win 3 prizes in a row. At that time, who in the world won't know you?" Sun Yin said in a low voice, "Earlier, I was watching the fire burning across the river and had nothing to do. In my mind, I have a set of 6 strategies to deal with the situation in Bailiang. Come, let's go back to our residence. Sun Yin will write it out for you. With this, you'll have the right to be a golden thread weaver. After that, there are also some rough drafts regarding the trend of the imperial court. I'll write them all for you. When the time comes, you can polish them a little. In the future, you might be able to become the provincial governor of Lingzhou. Tomorrow, I'll be returning to Huangnam County. You have to stay in the provincial capital. Tonight, the 2 of us will have a long talk. How about it?" Wang Wolfting said with a laugh, "I'm used to sharing a bed with my wife. If I fall asleep, be careful that I don't touch you." Sun Yin laughed loudly. Wang Wolfting had never seen Sun Yin laugh so happily before. In another small alley, Su Fengnian and Su Beiji walked side by side. Pei Nanwei followed behind them. Su Beiji said slowly, "According to the information from the spies around the 2 of them, Sun Yin learned the rare dragon-slaying technique and not the dragon riding technique. My grandfather had this idea before and told me about it in bits and pieces. However, he didn't dare to write it down. Are you really willing to let him go to the capital to be a chess piece that he might not be able to use for the rest of his life? Su Fengyin said with a smile. The Liang imperial court started with Tang Tisu, the great scholar of the Hall of Illustrious Persons, to the old Grand Secretary Liu Yanghe, and then to the current Grand Secretary Zhang Julu. No matter how the methods of governing the imperial court changed, regardless of whether it was the Liu faction or the Zhang faction, the core and hidden in the depths were actually of the same origin. For example, in the past, the Han family in Jizhou and the number one person in the cabinet, Liu Yanghe, were entangled in gratitude and grudges. The old Grand Secretary couldn't take down the Han family. After the mantle was passed on to Zhang Julu, he took the opportunity to borrow the emperor's knife to kill people, implicating 9 generations of the Han family. In a struggle between factions in the imperial court, the most important thing is inheritance. It's not much different from the virtues of aristocratic families. On the surface, the current Minister of Revenue, Wang Xiongui, is the number one disciple of Zhang Julu. However, my Shifu said that Wang Xionggui's vision is not big, far inferior to Zhang Julu's. The Emperor and Yuan Bunshi are probably happy to let Wang Xiongui take over the Zhang faction, but they definitely won't let him become the Grand Secretary. Zhang Julu and Huan were also clear on this point. With Zhang Julu's personality, he's not afraid of being punished after his death. Even if his entire family is executed, he won't be soft-hearted. The Emperor's scheming is to get rid of the donkey after it has outlived its usefulness. Zhang Julu is afraid that when the time comes, his ruling strategy will be changed by the imperial court. In the beginning, my Shifu allowed Jean Lanting to go to the capital because he knew that this person was not capable of taking on such a big responsibility. He also had the thought of plotting against Zhang Julu. However, now that Yao Baifeng publicly reprimanded Zhang Julu in the Imperial College, I reckon that Zhang Julu is also somewhat vigilant. Perhaps he's already prepared to replace Wang Xiongui, who will be at the helm of the Zhang faction in the future. Sun Yin's departure this time is just right. Of course, Sun Yin's usefulness is far from being that simple. Right now, what Beiliang needs to do is to make Sun Yin's journey to the capital very difficult and bumpy. This is an enormous secret. I plan to bypass Wutangyuan and let Chu Lushan personally handle it. Su Beiji smiled and said, "Are you afraid that Wutangyuan doesn't have enough experience? Or are you afraid that Second Princess will be too mentally and physically exhausted? Or is it because the peregrine falcon that hit Chu Lushan with a stick last year will reward him with a date to eat during the new year?" Su Beiji suddenly saw that Su Fengyin's expression was cold. Su Beiji's thoughts were very sharp. He was shocked and no longer joked. Su Beiji lamented in his heart. It wasn't easy to deliberately add oil to the fire of the imperial court. Beiliang's own family also couldn't escape one disaster after another. Su Fengyin suddenly laughed self-deprecatingly and said, "Being His Royal Highness and Lingzhou's general is already so tiring. Tell me, if he were to be the emperor of the world, how much effort would he have to put in?" Su Beiji smiled and said, "An emperor who knows how to use people is actually not as tiring as you think." Su Fengyin twirled the copper coin between his fingers and dismissed it with a smile. Han Laozhan almost couldn't take it anymore. He reported softly, "Your Highness, we've received news that a pair of master and servant with unknown backgrounds entered the country from Lingzhou's Xianxia County. They declared that they would meet your Highness who brought the head of the 5th raccoon back to Liangzhou. Xianxia County sent out 2 groups of more than 400 soldiers, but they couldn't stop them. Your Highness, this is the portrait of that pair of master and servant." Su Fengyin was confused. He took the 2 pieces of paper with the portrait. On the paper were detailed words and deeds. After he finished reading, he passed them to Su Beiji and smiled. "This brother is very arrogant. In the middle of winter, he's holding a fan of peach blossoms and beauties. He said that he's going to draw all the rouge on the 20 women on both sides of the book. He's really romantic. Zhu Zi, take a look. His looks are also the kind that can make female heroes fall in love. He's even better than you. Are you jealous? Su Beiji was puzzled and asked, when did such a person appear in Jianghu? What realm is he at? Su Fengyin said casually, he dares to strut around Bailiang so openly. Furthermore, he's pointing his spear at me, Su Fengyin. If he's not the first rank, isn't he courting death? Since he mentioned the fifth raccoon, his tone is extremely arrogant. I reckon that he's referring to the mystic realm. Han Laozhan asked softly, Your Highness, Su Yanbing isn't in Lingzhou. What if I leave the provincial capital to intercept this person? Su Fengyin smiled coldly and said, You don't have to go. Just see if he has the ability to come to the provincial capital. Once he's here, then see if he has the ability to leave alive.